Chapter 197. The teammates stood there, watching Feng Bujue talk nonsense with the leader of the beggar clan. Based on what Meng Jiao said, the reason he was guarding the entrance of the village was to point out the way for the martial artists who had just entered the village. At the same time, he was also there to investigate the background of the various people. As a member of the beggar clan, naturally, he could communicate with most of the people in the martial world. No matter the background, they had to give the old beggar some face. Meng Jiao told Feng Bujue about the rules of the small and main roads. After hearing that, Feng Bujue's first reaction was to ask, based on what you said, there are no villains in Changlin Town today. Everyone is from the righteous sects and famous martial artists? The old beggar laughed instantly. Are those from the righteous sects all good people? He asked in return, are those famous people actually good people behind the scenes? Feng Bujue had a smile on his face. Thank you for your advice. Actually, he just wanted Meng Jiao to make himself clear. With Feng Bujue's personality, how could he believe that these people were all good people? Even this Meng Jiao before him, he did not fully trust him. The other important part of their conversation was Meng Jiao's introduction of the current situation in Changlin Town. In other words, on the surface, there was a storm brewing, but in the dark, everyone was in a state of fear. The conversation with the NPC that provided the plot introduction lasted for 20 minutes. Feng Bujue had gotten almost all the information that he could get from the NPC. After he finished listening to the description, he thanked the senior and led his teammates into the town. After they left the old beggar's sight, Xiao Tan sidled up to him. Brother Bujue, did you hear that? Things are not looking good. Which part are you referring to? Feng Bujue asked. Of course, it's the part where people go missing every night. Xiao Tan answered, even though Meng Jiao said seriously that this is caused by ghosts. Feng Bujue smiled. But from how I see it, only you will believe that. Laughing Soul also smiled at Xiao Tan. Even the other NPCs in this scenario will not believe that. The old beggar is obviously just trying to scare us. I'm afraid even he does not believe his own words. How so? Xiao Tan asked. Laughing Soul replied, isn't that obvious? If this Meng Jiao really believed in ghosts, why would he stay on the street every night? At least find a roof to hide in, don't you think so? Meng Jiao, Feng Bujue said, people disappear every night, at least 7 or 8 people, at most 10 people. I believe 90% of those who disappeared were killed by people or killed each other. He paused for a moment. Perhaps only 1 or 2 of them encountered some kind of supernatural thing. Laughing Soul added, furthermore, the people from the martial world know this very well, but no one will point out this so-called ghost rumor. Xiao Tan nodded like he understood. That way, they can use the ghost rumor as a cover to kill other people in the future. Feng Bujue snapped his fingers. Correct, Atobi-sama then said. But why would these people do something like that? They have already arrived at Changlin Town. Is it because they want to be in the front row when the duel starts? Is that why they have been using these few days to find a chance to kill the other audience members? Sigh, you don't understand the business of the martial world. Feng Bujue said with sincerity like he knew this very well. Fame and wealth are human desires. Love and hatred are all caused by that. The Jianghu was a huge vat that embodied all of this in the most incisive and vivid manner. If a group of people from the martial world is placed in a specific and suitable environment, their human nature will be exposed. He looked around the dark and quiet village. Normally, there will be people that you can't stand. Perhaps you are jealous of them, or perhaps they have offended you before, or perhaps you know about the dirty things they have done in the dark, or perhaps they know about the dirty things you have done in the dark. But due to their identity or the other's identity, due to the rules of the martial world, ethics, and so on, it is impossible for them to do anything outside. He smiled. Look at how perfect Changlin Town is. You can say that no one cares about anything. Heaven, earth, and government. Once night falls, you can sneak out to kill those people that you have been holding back for so long and push the blame to the ghost that no one knows exists. Isn't it good that everyone is doing this with a tacit understanding that no one will expose the other? I say, You sure have a dark view of the human heart. Atobi-sama listened to Fong Bujue's vivid description, and he could not help but shrunk his neck back. Kid, you come from a good family, right? Fong Bujue looked at him with a smile. How did you know? Atobi-sama asked in return. Huh? Fong Bujue scratched his chin. Names are so hard to come up with. Names are so hard to come up with. The three of them are the kind of friends who, even though they bully you in public, when you run into trouble, they will rush to help you. Let me guess, they're brothers that I made when I was in school. Hey, you can tell something like that. Atobi-sama asked in shock. Fong Bujue patted Atobi-sama on his shoulder and sighed. So you don't understand the wickedness of the human heart. He then turned to look at Xiao Tan. Xiao Tan smiled, but did not say anything. He looked like he had been through this before. When you start working for someone else and interact with more people in society, you will know how many B** stars there are in the world and how B* stars can be, Fong Bujue said. While they were talking, a sudden change happened. In a small alley in front of them, a figure suddenly flashed out. It was a scholar in green, about 30 years old, with a handsome appearance, elegant and refined. For a woman who had just stepped into the world, when she saw this face, her heart would burn, and her cheeks would turn red. However, at that moment, the handsome man looked rather haggard. It was clear that he was heavily injured. His left shoulder was dyed red by fresh blood. When he ran, he not only staggered, but his breathing was also messed up. Under the moonlight, his pale face and fearful expression looked particularly pitiful. When he reached the street, he just had time to lift his head to look at Fong Bujue's group. When he opened his mouth to speak, his body suddenly bent sideways like he had been hit by a truck. His whole body flew out and slammed into a wall by the side of the road. In just a few breaths, he died. Fong Bujue raised his hand to signal for his teammates to stay back. He hurried forward to take a closer look at the body. Once he saw the body, he knew that the strange movement of the man being flung to the side was because he had been hit by more than 10 nail-like hidden weapons. It was as if he had been shot by a shotgun, and the force of the hidden weapons had sent him flying. At that moment, Fong Bujue was about to raise his head to look in the direction of the hidden weapons when he was attacked as well. Chapter 198. The person who threw the hidden weapon was called Si Yanran. She was the wife of the famous Thousand Dawn Spire's owner, Gong Sunqian. The man she had just killed was her lover and also a disciple of Thousand Dawn Spire. Si Yanran was 20 years old when she was first in the martial arts world with her unique darts. When she was 23, she met and married the owner of Thousand Dawn Spire, who was over 50 years old. In the blink of an eye, 10 years had passed. What had happened in the past 10 years? There was no need to go into detail. To sum it all up, a pear blossom beat to begonia was enough. The dead scholar in green was called Wang Ao. He was 24 years old. 3 years ago, he had joined Thousand Dawn Spire. Because he was handsome, he was chosen by his master's wife and was taken in as her last disciple. Since then, the two of them had started an illicit relationship. However, this Wang Ao was definitely not just a gigolo. He also had his own ambitions. When he first joined Thousand Dawn Spire, he had his eyes on Thousand Dawn Spire's ultimate skill, Thousand Dawn Magic. With his relationship with his master's wife, he had more confidence. About a year later, Wang Ao felt that the time was right. He started to beat around the bush, trying to get Si Yanran to steal the manual of Thousand Dawn Magic or give it to him. Si Yanran was not stupid. Although Gong's son, Qin, knew nothing about her affair, he was not so stupid that he did not know that the secret manual of the sect had been touched. So, she did not dare to do such a thing. On the other hand, Wang Ao kept mentioning this matter. In the end, it turned into a threatening attitude. So, Si Yanran wanted to kill him. This time, the two swordsmen were going to have a sword fight in Chonglin. As one of the most powerful sects in the martial arts world, Thousand Dawn Spire naturally would not miss out on this good show. As the master's wife and last disciple, they naturally followed the owner into the town. So, that was the reason for the previous scene. Just as Fong Bujue had said, in this small town, if he killed 1 or 2 people in the middle of the night, the sky would not care, and no one would care. As long as the body was cleaned up after the murder, and no one could tell who the murderer was from the wounds, everything would be fine. That was what Si Yinran had planned. She pretended to ask Wang Ao out for a date at night, but in reality, she wanted to kill him. What he didn't know was that the cunning Wang Ao had long noticed that something was amiss and had taken precautions. Just as she was about to attack, the other party immediately fled. However, Si Yinran's martial arts were much better than Wang Ao's, and the latter was unable to escape in the end. However, before he died, he happened to appear in front of Feng Bujue and the others. Just now, when Feng Bujue came forward to look at the corpse, Si Yinran had already cursed in her heart. There were many people in Jianghu who recognized her darts. Now that there was a witness, a murder weapon, and a corpse, the murder would definitely be exposed. Once this was exposed, the adultery would also be exposed. At that moment, Si Yinran's mind was in for a penny, in for a pound. In any case, these people don't seem to have any martial arts skills, so I might as well kill them all. You can only count yourselves unlucky. Hum, hum, hum. A few strange noises echoed around Feng Bujue. The darts that suddenly appeared in midair were blocked by an invisible barrier when they were about to hit Feng Bujue's body. If one looked closer, they would see that the surface of Feng Bujue's body was rippling due to the darts. This was obviously the buffer effect of the echo armor coming into play again. As mentioned before, when facing high-speed, multi-point darts, the sound barrier had a very obvious defensive effect. The darts at that moment fulfilled these two conditions. As for the power, even K3, Red Iron's close-range darts were blocked by the sound barrier. This long-distance darts were naturally nothing to worry about. Si Yinran did not expect something like this to happen, and she had no idea how Feng Bujue had managed to block the darts that she had thrown. Feng Bujue was relieved. If the opponent used close-range combat to attack him, he would have lost a lot of life points. Thankfully, the opponent chose to attack with darts, so he was not injured at all. Between this attack and defense, the situation had already changed. Si Yinran thought that someone like Feng Bujue, who had no internal energy, would definitely die after being hit by the darts. She wanted to silence him, so as she threw the darts, she rushed out of the alley and prepared to deal with the other 4 people. Who would have thought that after the kid was hit by her dart, he would stand there unscathed? Furthermore, a unique weapon that she had never seen before appeared in his hand like a magic trick. It was actually a wrench. She had to be on guard against all of this. On Feng Bujue's side, he instinctively took out his weapon and looked up. What entered his eyes was a woman. She was dressed in white, with a light gray mink fur jacket over her shoulders and a silver ribbon around her waist. Although this woman could not be considered a peerless beauty, her charming face and figure could be considered a great beauty. The fact that she was in her 30s made her look even more graceful and charming. "Lady, let's talk this out." Feng Bujue basically understood the reason behind the woman's attack in these few seconds. He said cleverly, "I don't know you." He pointed at the body on the ground. "I don't know him either." He cautiously maintained a certain distance from Si Yinran. "What happened earlier has nothing to do with me." Seeing the woman stop moving like she did not dare move forward, his heart relaxed. "My friends and I can pretend we didn't see anything and leave quietly. You could do whatever you want with this body." Si Yinran already had the intention to kill, so she would not be swayed by a few words. She scoffed. "Humph, don't you think it's too late to say that? You've already seen my face." Her eyes moved to Wang Ao's body. "You've seen his face, and that's enough." She was not wrong. She had no reason to believe that these strangers would keep what happened earlier a secret. If they did, then it meant that this secret would become a bargaining chip. Then, there's no other way. When Feng Bujue said that, he turned his face slightly and raised his voice. Obviously, he was warning his teammates and was ready to make his move. There was a flash of red light, and a powerful energy exploded around Feng Bujue. He was cautious of the power of the NPCs in this scenario, so he did not dare be careless. Therefore, he activated body enhancement spell at the start of the battle. On Si Yinran's side, she was even more nervous than Feng Bujue. At first glance, The man did not seem to have any internal energy, but the invisible force that deflected the dart through the air was something that only an expert with powerful internal energy could do. At this moment, the red visible chi was a cultivation method that she had never seen before. At this point, Si Yinran did not have the time to think anymore. She wanted to kill the man. Since the man before her had some tricks up his sleeve, she would use her full power and see if he could survive. She activated her internal energy, bent her knees slightly, and lashed out with her wrist. This time, only one of the darts flew at Feng Bujue, but it was incredibly powerful. It tore through the air like a whistle, and it was aimed at Feng Bujue's throat. Chapter 199. Since she was young, Si Yinran had been practicing her family's secret technique for hidden weapons. Her family had a long history. 10 years ago, she had married Gong's son Qian, who was old enough to be her father. Firstly, it was because of her status in Jianghu. Secondly, it was because of her wealth. Thirdly, it was because of the secret techniques of Thousand Dawn Spire. In the past 10 years, Si Yinran had not only practiced her family's secret technique to perfection, but she had also merged Thousand Dawn Spire's secret technique with her own internal energy. Although her current martial art cultivation was still inferior to the sect masters of those large sects, if she were to face the sect masters of second or third-rate sects, such as the Ocean Sand sect or the Azure Sea Sword sect, she would have a 90% chance of winning. Without a doubt, she was one of the top masters. And Feng Bujue, who was under the effect of body enhancement spell, was definitely at the level of a top master in terms of speed. Of course, he did not rely on Qin Gong or internal energy. Instead, he relied on the attributes given to him by the game. Even though his dynamic vision, reaction speed, and movement speed could keep up with Si Yinran's, in terms of fighting skills and experience, he was still far from her. Faced with this attack, if it was a real martial arts master, he would be able to dodge the dart and prepare a follow-up attack, or even turn the tables. But Feng Bujue, other than dodging, could not do anything else. He still needed to test his opponent before he could decide on his next move. It could be said that this was the magical part of the setting of martial arts. For example, an opponent like K3 Red Iron was strong, but that strength was all on the surface. It was a combination of strength, speed, energy, special characteristics, skills, and other factors. But in the world of Eastern wuxia, the standard to measure the strength of a master was vague and uncertain. The so-called first-rate, quasi-first-rate, innate, peerless, and so on were all very broad terms. The rankings in the armament manual were also relative. No one could say for sure that the person ranked at the top would definitely win against the person ranked at the bottom. Brilliant moves could allow a person who was at a disadvantage to defeat an opponent who was much stronger than him. Profound inner strength could allow a frail old man to break stone with his bare hands. Li Xuanwan's flying dagger, Lu Xiaofeng's fingers, Chu Liuxiang's qinggong, and so on and so forth. Nobody would care about exactly how much strength, exactly how fast, this kind of question. The kind of reserved and romantic characteristic of the East was where the wuxia world's charm lay. After all, Feng Bujue had never fought with an NPC who used martial arts before. What Si Yinran would do in the next second, and what she could do, he had no way of predicting. Therefore, he could only act cautiously and try to gain the upper hand after making a move. His thoughts weren't wrong. Si Yinran's previous move was a single move with two variations. Regardless of whether the opponent dodged or blocked, there would always be a follow-up move. If Feng Bujue took the risk, it would be even more dangerous. He saw a white shadow flash by, Si Yinran's finger holding the dart. Her next move had already arrived. Don't be fooled by the fact that she was a woman and used a small weapon. Her martial arts were both firm and fierce, and when she made a move, there was a faint sound of wind and thunder. Another 3 shockingly powerful darts were shot out. The attack point was straight down Feng Bujue's throat, respectively aiming at the Tian-Tu, Zigong, and Shanzhong acupoints on his chest. Si Yinran's next move was very unexpected. Looking at the way she threw the darts, it was absolutely impossible to guess where she was aiming at. If it were someone who had practiced martial arts for many years, after dodging the first dart. Based on experience and deduction, they would definitely think that Si Yinran's next move was aimed at the lower half of the body, or at the lower half of the body. If they really thought that, they would have fallen into a trap. As long as they moved half a minute in advance, the following 3 darts would be almost unavoidable. But Feng Bujue didn't think so much. If a fight between martial arts masters was compared to a game of chess, then at this moment, Si Yinran's half of the chessboard was filled with chess pieces, while Feng Bujue's half was filled with chess pieces. If you use aerial cannon, I will let the animals bite you. If you charge at the car, I will let the animals bite you. If you jump on the horse, I will send the animals to bite you. If you jump on the horse, I will send the animals to bite you. How many moves you can calculate is your own business. I don't have the concept of chess. Therefore, Feng Bujue once again did something that eluded the man. His expression was focused, but he didn't make the slightest move in advance. It was only when the dart completely left Si Yinran's hand that he began to react and once again dodged. Although it was dangerous, he still didn't suffer any injuries. Si Yinran was more and more surprised by Feng Bujue's strength. She had never met anyone who could react like this in their first fight. All the martial arts masters she had faced before, when faced with this move, would move in advance. But some people's martial arts were very high. Even if they found out, they still had a way to remedy it. But Feng Bujue's way of dealing with it was more like someone who didn't know martial arts. But he had the speed to dodge the attack at the last moment. Doubt in the heart, movement will be slow. Although Si Yinran's attack didn't stop, but her decisiveness was gone. At this moment, she was thinking in her heart, if this brat can take 20 moves from me, it's hard to say who will win. His few companions seemed to be low-level characters, but if they're all like this brat, of course, thinking was just thinking she still had a fight. After throwing the dart, Si Yinran's figure was already in front of Feng Bujue. Taking advantage of the fact that her opponent had not yet stabilized his footing, she activated her internal strength and struck out with her palm. This move, soft wind permeating clouds, seemed to be no different from a normal palm technique, but in fact there was a hidden mystery. A viscous internal strength was wrapped around her palm. As long as her opponent used his internal strength and raised his palm to meet it, Si Yinran's hidden strength would seep into his body and enter his dantian. At this time, it would be impossible for her opponent to use his internal strength and withdraw his hand. If the opponent's internal strength was weak, then his palm would be tightly stuck and his dantian would be as hot as boiling water. If it was light, then his internal strength would be wasted, and if it was heavy, then he would die on the spot. Si Yinran used this move because she couldn't see any signs of internal strength in Feng Bujue's body, so she wanted to test it out. If this brat's previous actions were all a fluke, then this palm strike would definitely kill him. But if this brat was using a unique technique to hide his internal energy, then this palm strike would be able to roughly determine the level of his internal energy. But the development of the situation was, in an instant, a golden shadow burst forth. Si Yinran's palm actually hit an invisible barrier the size of a door. This defensive technique was undeniably the special effect of Death Poker, the shield card. When Si Yinran approached, Feng Bujue already knew that things were not going well. He thought to himself, I can dodge and block long-distance attacks, but this group of martial arts experts is no joke. Earlier, that old Far Yi blocked my skill with his bare hands, and I lost 30% of my life points. Now that this woman has taken the initiative to attack me, how can I use my body to block her attacks? Therefore, Feng Bujue instantly took out his sorcery weapon and used its special effect without hesitation. The few exchanges between him and Si Yinran were as fast as lightning. In total, it only took about 10 seconds. By then, the other teammates had arrived to help. The first to arrive was not Xiao Tan, who was known for his speed, nor was it Passing Rain, who was the best in the group, but Atobi-sama. Once he saw that there was a battle, he was excited. At the end of the day, he was the highest-level player in the group and a professional player. How could he allow himself to be mocked by Feng Bujue? He had to show off his skills and let his teammates see his strength. Atobi instantly used the signature skill of his title, Flashy Ambush, Flash Impact. Name: Flash Impact Special Ability Type. Active Consumption: 300 stamina points effect. Morph into a ray of light and attack the target at high speed, unleashing a powerful slash. After the skill ends, appear 2 meters behind the target with your back facing the target. Cooldown of 5 minutes. Must be equipped with a sharp weapon. Can be activated within 2 to 20 meters of the target, but cannot pass through obvious obstacles. Remark: if you run into an enemy who is much weaker than you and want to use a cool and clean method to take them down, this is the skill you need. By the way, Atobi-sama's weapon was a large fan about 65 centimeters long. It was made of steel, and when it was opened, the edge of the fan was incredibly sharp. In the Jianghu of this scenario, not many people would be able to wield this weapon. This weapon, combined with Atobi-sama's title skill, was like adding wings to a tiger. Normally, if he were to fight with this thing, his speed would not increase at all. However, under the effect of sudden charge, as long as he could lift something, he would be able to quickly close in on his target and slash at it. On the other hand, Si Yanran was confused by Feng Bujue's inexplicable defense. Out of the corner of her eyes, she saw a flash of light beside her, and a human shadow rushed at her like a gust of wind. Her face paled, and in a hurry, she chose to jump away to evade. Who would have thought that her instinctive reaction was the best skill to deal with ambushes? The weakness of Flash Impact was that as long as the target jumped up in the 2 seconds before the attack, there was an 80% chance that the attack would miss. As expected, when Atobi-sama reached the spot where Si Yanran was standing, the skill effect disappeared. He did not hit anything and even stopped moving. At the same time, he heard the sound of wind behind him, and the 2 darts arrived. Si Yanran's battle rhythm had been messed up by these players. She had no idea how to fight this battle. With the mentality that she would fight wherever she went, she twisted her body and threw 2 darts at Atobi-sama's Ling Tai point on his back. It was a waste not to hit him. It was not like she would get pregnant if she tried. But to her surprise, with 2 clicks, they hit. Since Atobi-sama rushed over, he was between Feng Bujue and Si Yanran, so the latter could not block the darts even if he wanted to. Thankfully, as a professional player, Atobi-sama was not lacking in armor. The 2 clicks were not the sound of the darts piercing into his spine, but the sound of them hitting his armor. The 2 darts fell to the ground, and Atobi-sama staggered several steps and almost fell. Even though the darts did not penetrate his armor, he was not wearing the echo armor, so the impact of the darts still reached his body and caused him to lose 16% of his life points. After Si Yanran landed on the ground, she was even more puzzled. In her eyes, the players were all dressed like young warriors in ancient times. They were dressed in normal cotton clothes and did not look like they were wearing armor. However, the sound just now and the darts that bounced off seemed to have hit something hard, the highest level of Golden Bell Shield. Chi protection? Si Yanran thought. How is that possible? This kid looks so weak, so how strong can his physical skills be? Even if he has practiced Golden Bell Shield, he would need to grab the ground and gather his energy to take on my 2 darts. But he hasn't even gotten into the horse stance, so how can the darts not pierce his body? Thinking up to here, Si Yanran already had thoughts of retreating. If the 5 people in front of her were from the same sect, then no matter what kind of martial arts they used, her most proficient hidden weapons would be useless. If it was a close combat battle, then she would have to fight 1 against 5. How could she win? The problem was, at this point, even if she begged for mercy, they might not let her go. She could only blame herself for underestimating the enemy and being too harsh with her words. If he were to fight, he would probably die here. If he were to flee, the fact that he had killed Wang Ao would be exposed before the sun rose. Sooner or later, he would be dead, and he would also be labeled as an unfaithful lover. The more Si Yanran thought about it, the more despairing she became. Her face was ashen, and a fire burned at her heart. She bit on her lips lightly, and the thought of fighting for her life came into her mind. At that moment, a figure just so happened to arrive. It was none other than Wang Tanji, who was holding the dagger. In fact, Xiao Tan didn't think too much about it. He just decided to charge at the enemy first. After all, once he got close enough, he he would attack. Unexpectedly, Si Yanran was so anxious that she didn't care about anything else. Facing the enemy closest to her, she gathered all the qi in her body and swung her fist. The fist flew toward Xiao Tan. Before it even came into contact, there was already a slight crackling sound in the air. This punch might not be as good as the one Si Yanran used before, but in terms of pure power, it was enough to send a player back to the login lobby. Xiao Tan's luck was pretty bad this time, but he still had the strength. At this critical moment, his eyes flashed with a suffocating calmness. Devil Bat, Ghostly Shadow, was immediately activated. Xiao Tan's body split into two, and the two illusionary shadows flew past Si Yanran. Si Yanran's punch, with all her strength, had actually missed, and the wind from the punch had caused the ground in front of her to be filled with dust and sand. She stood where she was in shock. She slowly turned her head around to look at Xiao Tan, who appeared several meters behind her. She gasped internally. What is it this time? Could it be the long-lost trap of snares? While she was still in shock, the holy seal in Passing Rain's hand had already arrived, and it was aimed at Si Yanran's neck. Wait! This shout was like a sudden clap of thunder that rang out from a dark alley. At the same time, the blade that Passing Rain swung out was hit by a small stone. Even though this hit was not enough to make her lose life points, it made her arm go numb and her movement slowed. Si Yanran recovered from her shock and hurriedly jumped back. The light of hope reappeared in her eyes. Even though she didn't know who was helping her in the dark, the situation before her had changed. Chapter 200. This shout of slow and the flying stone changed the situation in an instant. Just as everyone was stunned by this sudden change, the person hiding in the shadows suddenly flew out. He appeared in the opposite direction from where the shout had come from. He didn't appear where Si Yanran and Passing Rain were fighting, but appeared about 10 feet behind Feng Bujue. This person was dressed in green, the same as Wang Ao's dead body on the ground. Because his movements were extremely fast and he intentionally dodged, even Feng Bujue, who was closest to him, couldn't see his face clearly. He only knew that this was a man with a square face. He was tall and strong, and his skills were extraordinary. Feng Bujue reacted and immediately turned around, wanting to meet the enemy's attack. But he didn't think that this uninvited guest target wasn't him at all. He saw the person who rushed out roar like a tiger, and with a flip of his palm, he slammed it down on the corpse on the ground. This move had been brewing for a long time, and its power was astonishing. When it was released, it rumbled like thunder. Feng Bujue instantly understood this person's intention, but he was powerless to do anything. Wang Ao's corpse was shattered by this person's surging palm power, and the half of his body that was covered with darts immediately had his bones and tendons broken, and his organs spilled out. After the man did that, he immediately yelled at Si Yanran, "Let's go." As he yelled, he waved his palm at the spot in front of Feng Bujue, forcing him to retreat. Si Yanran seemed to have realized something, and she already knew who this person was. She turned around and ran, while at the same time, she threw out 10 darts to cover her retreat. This time, the darts flying over weren't very fast or powerful, but there were many of them, and they covered a wide area. Passing Rain and Xiao Tan, who were closer to them, had to retreat or block. It was clear that Si Yanran was in a hurry to leave, so she focused all of her energy on activating her Qigong and threw out the darts to delay the pursuers. The man and Si Yanran ran in different directions, and the players had no way to chase after them. Facing the two's Qigong of the 5 players, only Feng Bujue had the ability to chase after them, and he had to maintain the buff of body enhancement spell, or else there was no way he could catch up to them. Even though Passing Rain was more skillful than Brother Ju, she did not have enough power to support her stats. To catch up to these two without the aid of any skill, she would need to wait until she reached level 25, and that was not possible now. "What's going on?" Xiao Tan asked, before Feng Bujue could answer, laughing. "You still don't get it? We're going to be scapegoats." "Huh?" Xiao Tan was confused. Atobi-sama's expression was similar to his. "What do you mean? Isn't everything right before our eyes?" Feng Bujua deactivated the body enhancement spell and said, "Now that the body is unrecognizable, the two can say whatever they want about what happened here." He walked toward Wang Ao's body. From the woman's words, it's clear that she doesn't want others to know that she's the killer. And we just happened to witness the process of her killing. From her perspective, there are two choices. One, she could have abandoned the body and escaped without showing herself. Two, she could have killed all of us. She chose the second choice, which means that the kung fu or weapon she used is very recognizable in the martial world. She thought that even if we didn't see the killer's face, once we saw the body, we would know who the killer was. Therefore, when she saw me approach, she made her move. "Oh, so at the beginning, you said things like, 'I don't know you,' and 'I don't know him,' and 'you can do whatever you want with the body.'" Xiao Tan was enlightened. Feng Bujua nodded. At the time, I already knew what she was thinking. I tried to solve it peacefully, but she obviously didn't believe us. Of course, that is human nature. If I was in her shoes and was seen by several strangers when I committed the crime, no matter how sincerely they swore that they would keep it a secret, I wouldn't have believed them, because in the end, they would have used this to blackmail me. Honestly, if they hadn't blackmailed me, I would have felt uneasy. As Feng Bujua spoke, he squatted down beside the disgusting body. The man who appeared later has probably been observing us for a long time already. He thought that he didn't need to do anything because the woman could kill all of us, so he didn't show himself. The martial artists in this scenario seem to be able to tell that we don't know kung fu or that we don't have internal energy through observation. I believe the man and woman were no exception. He used the wrench to poke at the dart in the flesh and brought it closer to his eyes. But in reality, our fighting ability was far beyond their estimation. But since things had reached this stage, the woman had no choice but to hold on until the end. Therefore, when the man saw that things weren't going his way, he came up with a plan. Feng Bujua started to look for the side of the body that was more intact. He tried to find something on the body, to destroy the body. He used a praising tone. Now that the body is in this state, they can say that it was us who killed this man, and he and the woman just happened to arrive and get into a fight with us. That's why the hidden weapons were scattered around the area. He scoffed. Humph! Before the man charged out, he had been observing for a long time, and he had come up with a plan. He saved the woman at the last moment, and at the same time, he purposely used the sound to confuse us. Then he suddenly appeared and took down the body that was covered in hidden weapons. If the body was intact, there would be a difference between the hidden weapons that flew in and the ones that stuck in after death, and the fatal wound would have been obvious. But now, even if we take out a hidden weapon stuck in the flesh, it won't prove anything. In this state, it doesn't matter if the man was killed by some kind of kung fu or was bitten to death by a wild animal. Doesn't that mean we'll have to take the blame? Atobi-sama asked. It doesn't matter. Feng Bujua replied. He couldn't find anything on the body, so he shrugged and stood up. This may be a blessing in disguise. What do you mean by that? Xiao Tan asked. Then, Passing Rain said, You're trying to bluff, right? Clever. Feng Bujua winked at her with a smile. Laughing Soul added, That is indeed a good idea. Atobi-sama had a confused expression on his face. The way you guys communicate is too weird. What are you talking about all of a sudden? Feng Bujua turned to look at him and Xiao Tan. You'll understand tomorrow. Chapter 201. After dealing with this encounter, the five did not continue to move toward the center of town, but turned into a nearby alley. After walking for a while, they found a random house and entered it. Changlin Town was not that big, but it was still a town and not a small place. Or else, the fight earlier would have attracted a crowd of onlookers. After the town had been abandoned for many years, there were many straw huts around the town. They were empty and had nothing valuable. If one could tolerate the pests in the huts, it was not a bad idea to go in and hide behind a roof. According to the information provided by Meng Jiao, other than the disciples of the major sects who lived in the inns in the center of the town, the other wanderers of the Jianghu, or people from the second and third class sects could only find such houses near the inns. Of course, Meng Jiao and the other elders did not consider this problem. Beggars were used to sleeping on the streets. As players, Feng Bujue and the rest could ignore basic needs like eating, drinking, and sleeping in the scenario. They only needed to pay attention to their stamina points and their ability to focus. There was about an hour left until dawn. Feng Bujue's plan was for them to hide for another 2 to 3 hours and wait until 7 a.m. before heading to the inn at the center of town. He made use of this time to allow his life points and stamina points to recover on their own. At the same time, he talked about the situation and countermeasures after dawn. Due to the high degree of freedom in this scenario, be it time, map, or mission, there were no restrictions on the players. Therefore, they did not need to worry about being judged as AFKing by the system, and they could focus on fixing themselves. Of course, Feng Bujue was very efficient. In half an hour, he had finished telling the players everything that he wanted to say. The next 2 hours turned into a game of words, and Xiao Tan being pelted with snacks by Laughing Soul. While the players spent the 2 hours hiding in the dark, Yen ran, and the square-faced man did not stay idle. The two would meet up to discuss the details of the framing plan. They didn't know each other. Earlier, when Yen ran caught a glimpse of the man, she recognized him as the second-in-command of Thousand Dawn Spire, Gong Sun Li. Although this Gong Sun, Li also had the surname Gong Sun, he was not related to Gong Sun Qian at all. They just happened to have the same surname. Gong Sun Qian joined the sect 10 years earlier than Gong Sun Li, and he was also 10 years older than Gong Sun Li. Moreover, both of them were very talented in martial arts. They were outstanding talents among the disciples of the same generation. Thus, after a few decades, they became the top 2 figures of the Thousand Dawn Spire. In the Thousand Dawn Spire, Gong Sun Qian was the best in terms of martial arts. However, Gong Sun Li's shrewdness was far beyond his senior brother. Take the matter between Yen Ran and Wang Ao as an example. Gong Sun Qian was kept in the dark, but Gong Sun Li was very clear about it. The amazing thing about this person was that he knew, but he didn't say anything, and he could even pretend that he didn't know. He did not threaten anyone with this matter, nor did he interfere with the development of the situation. Gong Sun Li's principle was to be on guard in secret. Therefore, he was always prepared when faced with unexpected situations. It was precisely this style of doing things that allowed him to turn the tide at such a critical moment. Gong Sun Li helped Yen Ran not because he was close to this woman or because he had other intentions toward her. He was doing this purely to protect the reputation of the Thousand Dawn Spire. He knew very well that once the murder was exposed, the adultery would be exposed as well. If this had happened somewhere else, it would have been fine, but it happened here. Currently, Chonglin Town was even more crowded than the martial arts convention. If this scandal of the Thousand Dawn Spire was exposed, then no matter where they went, people would point at them and say things like the wife of the leader is having an affair with her disciple. How would the disciples of the Thousand Dawn Spire survive in the martial world? At this moment, there weren't many righteous and chivalrous people who could side with reason and not with their relatives. Under such circumstances, Gong Sun Li wouldn't talk about the truth or morality anymore. He would just push all the blame to those outsiders. After all, from the looks of Feng Bujue's group, they were all in their 20s, and none of them were familiar faces. Even if they did know some kung fu, they were still new to the martial world. With his position as the second-in-command of the Thousand Dawn Spire, and Yen Ran's position as the wife of the leader, if he wanted to frame these 5 people for Wang Ao's murder, wouldn't that be easy? That night, after Gong Sun Li and Yen Ran finished their discussion, they immediately went to find Gong Sun Qian. The two said that they accidentally saw Wang Ao going out in the middle of the night and felt that something was off, so they followed him. However, after following him for a while, they realized that Wang Ao was already dead in the middle of the street, and beside his body stood 5 mutants with strange kung fu. After the fight, they realized how powerful the mutants were. They were afraid that they would not be able to hold on against 5 mutants, so they could only run back to report this. Even though Gong Sun Qian felt that there were a few loopholes in the story, he did not think too much about it. He immediately led his disciples out of the inn and followed Yen Ran and Gong Sun Li's directions to the scene of the incident. As they expected, they found Wang Ao's broken body lying on the street. From the number of footprints and the number of darts scattered on the ground, there was indeed a fight that involved many people. However, with the situation they were in, they did not know where to find the 5 people. They could only collect the body and return to the inn to plan their next move. This group of people had mobilized a large force to enter and leave the inn. Naturally, they were noticed by many people. Before the sun rose, the news had spread. Almost all the factions and martial artists heard that Wang Ao of the Thousand Dawn Spire had been killed, and the killers seemed to be 5 mysterious masters that had not been heard of in the martial world. The next morning, at Chonglin Inn, the cooks and waiters in the inn were already busy before the sun rose. By then, buns after buns and pots of freshly brewed tea were already prepared. They were waiting for the guests to call for them. When did this inn in Chonglin town reopen for business? Even the workers at the inn had no idea. In any case, in the middle of the 7th month, when people heard about the duel between Xie San and Yi Cheng and rushed to the town, the inn was already open for business. As long as the people of Jianghu inquired about the inn's history from the shop's staff, the response they received was that they didn't know anything. This was because the waiters at the inn did not know Kung Fu and did not know anything about the martial world. They were all normal citizens from the nearby towns. Someone gave them a sizable sum of money and told them that they only needed to work there for a month. After the 15th day of the 8th month, the inn would close and they would go their separate ways. The owner of the inn did not appear often. He was a man about 40. He had a soft face, and his face was extremely pale 24 hours a day. In the morning, he looked like a ghost, and at night, he was nowhere to be seen. If he was told that he was the ghost of the town, perhaps people would believe it. After talking about the owner of the inn, it was time to talk about the guests of the inn. In this scenario's wuxia world, the strongest factions in the martial world were the 1 family, 2 floors, 3 factions, and 4 doors. There were 10 factions in total. The 1 family was the Yi family of Xian. The 2nd floor was Thousand Dawn Spire and Octagonal Spire. The 3 factions were Shaolin, Rinwu, and Xiaoyao, and the 4 doors were Kaifeng Wuji, Western Jin Gang, Luoyang Gang of Justice, and Shu Zhongtang sect. Among these sects, the House of Yi was the most respected in the martial arts world. Their top experts were publicly acknowledged as the strongest in the martial world. Other than Yi Cheng, who was known as the God of Swords, the 6 flowery blades at the manor were all top-notch experts. The falling plum blade, Lu Qingning, was one of the 6 experts. Of course, she had also disappeared last night. The 2nd floor, Thousand Dawn Spire and Octagonal Spire, were the most influential factions. Both factions had a unique manual that was passed down from generation to generation. They were Thousand Dawn Kung Fu and Octagonal Mantra. Their leaders were also experts who were only second to Yi Cheng. In the martial world, even if they were not in the top 10, they would not be in the top 20. Therefore, these 2 factions had many disciples, and the experts in the Spire were not weak either. Then there were the 3 factions Shaolin, Rinwu, and Xiaoyao. They all worshipped Buddhism, Confucianism, and Taoism. Other than martial arts, they also taught ideology. The spirit of these 3 factions was to redeem people. Therefore, they had many disciples, and they did not care about talent when accepting disciples. In any case, the 3 factions had a long history, and there were many different types of martial arts. The disciples with low talent would learn the most basic martial arts, and those with high talent would learn more advanced martial arts. Taking the 72 skills of Shaolin as an example, it was already good enough for a person to master one in their lifetime. Since ancient times, the only person who had mastered all 72 skills was Master Bodhidharma. No one dared to compete with such a deity. The last 4 could be considered the weakest among the first-tier factions. However, the Limitless Sect's Limitless Grand Technique, the Vajra Sect's Dragon Elephant Prajna Technique, the Righteous Sect's Heavenly Saber Technique, and the Tang Sect's Poison Sect's Consummate Technique were all unique and had their own strengths. Under certain circumstances, even the martial arts of the Thousand Dawn Spire or the Octagon Spire might not be their match. For example, the Dragon Elephant Prajna skill, to quote from swordsman Jin Yang's setting in The Return of the Condor King, is the ultimate protective skill of Tantric Buddhism. It is split into 13 levels. The first level is very easy. Even the most foolish person can master it in 1 or 2 years. The second level is twice as deep as the first, and it will take 3 to 4 years. The third level is twice as deep as the second, and it will take 7 to 8 years. In this way, the further one goes, the harder it is to progress. After the 5th level, to master the next level, it will take more than 30 years of hard work. This skill, theoretically speaking, even for someone who is not that talented, as long as they kept progressing, they would be able to master the 13th level. Of course, that person would have to have a lifespan of more than 300 years. Looking at the actual situation, since ancient times, only Jinluan Fuang, that kind of peerless genius, was able to cultivate to the 10th level in his lifetime due to his painstaking cultivation and rapid progress. According to the Dragon Elephant Prajna skill, each palm strike had the power of 10 dragons and 10 elephants. Therefore, it was hard to tell the strength of Kung Fu. For some Kung Fu, you only needed to cut off one of your organs, and you would be able to reach a certain level quickly. But for some Kung Fu, even if you practiced it your whole life, you would not be that good if you were not talented enough. That was the situation of the first-tier factions, and Beggar's sect was only the leader of the second-tier factions in this world. Even though Meng Jiao's seniority was high, his Kung Fu was about the same as Yi Hai's. It was impossible for him to compete with Yi Cheng or the 2 house masters. Even if he was matched up against the leaders of the 3 sects and 4 clans, Meng Jiao did not dare say he could win. The elders and core disciples of Beggar's sect were not as powerful as the elites of the first-tier factions. Perhaps people would ask, didn't the biggest sect in the world have something like the 18 dragon subduing palms? Indeed, Meng Jiao had learned the 18 dragon subduing palms before, but not everyone could reach Xiao Feng's level. At the end of the day, it was still a matter of the person. If Xiao Feng had practiced Prajna palms since he was young and lived to 60, he would have been able to turn all the previous leaders of Beggar's sect into dust with 1 palm strike. Let's talk about the other second-tier sects, such as Jinsang, Amei, Huashan, Kongtong, and so on. Over the past few years, they did not have any particularly eye-catching talents. It was a bit like they were declining in their legacy and inheriting their legacy in their decline. The rest were third-rate and unranked gangs, such as the Whale Gang, the Azure Sea Sword sect, or the XX Escort Agency. You could say that these people were from the martial world, or you could say that they were salt smugglers, farmers, and security companies. In terms of martial arts, their sect leaders could only be considered average, but this Chong Lin Sword Symposium had attracted the attention of the world. Naturally, this group of people had come to participate. It was as if by participating in this, their sect would rise in status. In the future, they could even brag to others. Back then, when Yi Cheng and CSM were fighting at Chonglin Town, I was there. As for those stragglers who didn't belong to any sect, they weren't that many. So far, there were only 17 or 18 people who had successfully entered the town through the small roads. Those who had entered through the main roads were on good terms with the major sections. They were famous heroes who had illustrious reputations. There were only 30 or so of them. On the 13th of August, the inn was fully occupied by the leaders and disciples of the 10 sections. Only a few lone travelers who had arrived earlier, had a high status in Jianghu, and had high martial arts attainments, were able to occupy some rooms in the inn. The people from the second-tier and third-tier factions and other martial artists who arrived in 2s and 3s stayed in the abandoned houses around the inn. As long as there was a bamboo stick stuck in front of the door, it meant that the place had been occupied, and those that did not have one, please do as you wish. In any case, the town was ungoverned, so the rules were set. In conclusion, that was the current situation of Chonglin Town. However, the 2 main characters of the duel, Yi Cheng and Xie had not appeared in town. Cold dew hung in the autumn sky, and the distant mountains were in sight. The autumn morning in a small town in the mountains gave people a very comfortable feeling. Every morning, the leaders of the various factions, including those who stayed outside the inn, would bring one or two of their most trusted disciples to find a table on the first floor of the inn to have tea and breakfast. They would chat among themselves. On the surface, it was polite, but actually, they were testing each other. And the topic that day was naturally the death of Thousand Dawn Spire's disciple, Wang Ao. Tower Master Gong's son, the sun hasn't risen yet. Why are you and your disciples making such a ruckus? The one who asked this question was a fat monk with an oily face. He was holding a wine jar early in the morning. He didn't sit at the table, but leaned against the side of the stairs that led to the second floor of the inn, sitting directly on the ground. His face was red, and he looked tipsy. His kasaya was open, and a string of prayer beads hung before his chest. Each of the beads was about the size of a fist. The monk's name was Lu San. Even though he was a Buddhist disciple, Lu San was not from Shaolin Temple. It was unclear which temple this monk came from, and he had learned a rather advanced fist technique, Drunken Luo Han, and that was how he made a name for himself in the martial world. Over the past decade, he had done many good deeds in the martial world, and he could be considered a hero. Humph! Monk Lu, did you hear it wrong because you were drunk? Gong's son Qin scoffed. He did not admit or deny it. Everyone in the martial world knew that drunken monk Lu San was good at pretending to be drunk. Lu San could say whatever he wanted. As long as he acted drunk, he was not afraid of offending anyone. If the other party was angry, the monk would say that he was drunk and spouting nonsense. That way, both sides would be able to step down. Oh, could it be that I was dreaming? That's not right. Why do I smell blood in my dream? Lu San put on an act and asked again. Si Yin ran, who was sitting next to Gong's son Qian, turned her head and replied in annoyance. Maybe your nose has also been damaged by the alcohol. Master Gong's son, I also heard the commotion. A tall and thin man in his 40s or 50s interrupted with a smile. Did you bring your disciples to hunt in the middle of the night? Ha! The food you hunted was quite strong. This person was Octagonal Tavern Master Jitong. He had a grudge with Gong's son Qian, so it was normal for him to be sarcastic. Gong's son Qian did not bury Wang Ao's body last night. Instead, he ordered his disciples to wrap it in a straw mat and bring it back to the inn. Currently, the body was in a room that belonged to them and was guarded by 2 disciples. As for the smell, he had already treated it with a special medicine. It could temporarily suppress the smell for a day and a night. Ha ha! Master Ji's nose is really sharp. Gong's son Qian was not to be outdone. He scolded and laughed at the same time. Beside him, Gong's son Li, Si Yin ran, and the other 2 disciples all laughed along, as if these words were very funny. Humph! Ji Tong slammed the table. You didn't wipe it clean and you're farting with your mouth? What did you say? Ha ha! Ji Tong laughed. Master Gong's son, you didn't bury your disciple because you didn't find the murderer, right? Ha! Ji Tong, am quite knowledgeable. Why don't you let me take a look at the body so that you can find the murderer? Humph! I appreciate Master Ji's kindness. Gong's son, Qian, snorted. It's not my first day out in the pugilistic world. I don't need your help. As the 2 of them engaged in a heated exchange of words, the sect leaders and martial artists of the other sects around them watched the commotion in silence. At this moment, a few figures appeared at the entrance of the inn. It was Feng Bujue and his teammates. They walked in from the main entrance. Chapter 202. When Feng Bujue stepped into the inn, many people saw him, but no one recognized him. Therefore, no one paid much attention to him and the 4 people behind him. They thought they were a bunch of second- or third-tier factions disciples who did not know the rules and had barged into the inn. At that time, Si Yinran's attention was focused on the conversation between Gong's son Qian and Jitong. After all, she was a coward, and she was afraid that her mistake would be seen by others, so she listened to every word nervously. Si Yinran's seat was facing the entrance of the inn, so when she saw someone walk in from the corner of her eye, she inadvertently glanced in that direction. It would have been fine if she didn't glance, but when she did, she was so shocked that she stood up, knocking the stool under her to the ground. Gong's son Qian felt something was wrong, so he stopped his conversation with Jitong. He turned his head and saw his wife staring in the direction of the inn's entrance with a look of surprise. He followed Si Yinran's gaze and asked, "My wife, what's wrong?" "It's them." Si Yinran pointed at Feng Bujue and the rest who had just walked in and said, "They're the mysterious people who killed Wang Ao last night." At that moment, the atmosphere in the whole inn changed. Several seconds ago, the various martial artists had ignored the appearance of these five, but now, it was as if they had seen some important characters. All their eyes were focused on Feng Bujue's group. However, no matter how the group of seniors sized them up, the five of them still looked ordinary and mediocre. In terms of appearance, they were quite handsome young men. Their clothes were very ordinary, and they didn't seem to have any weapons on them. There wasn't the slightest trace of fear on their faces, but they also didn't have the shrewd and ruthless demeanor of someone who had been in Jianghu for a long time. The most puzzling thing was that their movements didn't seem like they were people who practiced martial arts. "Humph, so it's you guys." Feng Bujue heard that and added coldly. As he spoke, he led his teammates forward. The table in Chong Lin's lobby was not a square table, but a small round table. Each table could fit 6 people at most. Feng Bujue came to an empty table and sat down. After his teammates took their seats, he looked at a waiter who was far away. He snapped his fingers and beckoned for the waiter to come over. The people there had seen many things before, but they had never seen someone snap their fingers. As the saying goes, it takes 2 hands to clap, but today they saw someone make a weird gesture with one hand, and it made a crisp snap. Although this could not be said to be a great ability, everyone felt that this trick was rather novel in their hearts. Feng Bujue used this seemingly casual and simple method to leave a weird and frivolous first impression on these martial artists. The waiter was startled for 2 seconds before he walked over. Out of habit, he removed the cloth from his shoulder and started to wipe the table. At the same time, his other hand skillfully arranged a few teacups and poured tea for the guests. Dear guests, what would you like to order?" "Guest room," Feng Bujue said. "Oh, I'm so sorry." When the waiter said that, he had already finished the task of wiping the table and pouring the tea. He smiled apologetically. "You see, the inn has had quite a number of guests recently, and it's already full. How about you move away?" Suddenly, a deep voice came from behind the waiter. The breath from the person's mouth hit the back of the waiter's neck. The waiter was spooked, and he quickly moved to the side. Instantly, Feng Bujue's eyes met with the person who spoke. It was a man in his 50s. His hair was gray, and his expression was slightly angry. Gong Sunqian's face was quite unique. His brows were long, his nose high, his eyes low, his cheeks flat, his mouth narrow, and his jaw wide. When put together, he was not ugly, but he was very recognizable. "Senior, are you looking for me?" Feng Bujue asked calmly. Who's your senior?" Gong Sun Qian scoffed. Gong Sun Li and Si Yinran were standing on either side of the Thousand Dawn Spire's owner. Behind them, there were 2 disciples from the Thousand Dawn Spire. "I see." Feng Bujue heard this and slowly stood up. Other than Gong Sun Qian, everyone else from the Thousand Dawn Spire took a step back. Obviously, Si Yinran had already spread the word about the player's unpredictable combat power within the Thousand Dawn Spire. If she did not make the other party more powerful, then she would not be able to explain her escape. Furthermore, it would be very embarrassing. The atmosphere in the inn started to heat up. Many of the younger disciples who had little experience in the world were already excited. They hoped that the 2 parties would start fighting so that they could see for themselves how powerful Gong Sun Qian's Thousand Dawn divine skill was. Then, Feng Bujue changed his words and said, "What do you want from me?" As soon as he said this, the inn fell silent. It was as if a cold wind had blown through the hall. After being scolded, Gong Sun Qian did not know how to respond. After all, the other party did call him senior at first. It was he who objected to it. "You already know the answer." Gong Sun Qian pretended that he did not hear anything. He said directly, "Why did you kill my disciple on the street last night?" Feng Bujue did not react much after hearing this. His teammates looked like they were watching a show. They sipped their tea with relaxed expressions. "Oh, so he's your disciple." Feng Bujue looked at Si Yinran's face and then at Gong Sun Li. He had already recognized this person as the square-faced man from last night. Si Yanran and Gong Sun Li's eyes flashed, but they still looked very righteous. Si Yanran even said, "Humph, what's wrong? Today, in front of my husband, in front of the Thousand Dawn Spire, you don't dare to admit it?" Since she was trying to frame him, she naturally had to take advantage of any opportunity to say something similar to confuse the public. According to her logic, even if Feng Bujue denied it, he was still denying it. Feng Bujue was silent for 2 seconds. He quickly sorted out the identities and relationships of these people in front of him. He then replied, "Huh? I didn't come here to argue with you, but you came looking for me?" Just when the real culprit and his accomplice thought that he was going to tell the truth, Feng Bujue unexpectedly shouted at Gong Sun Qian, "Why wouldn't I admit it? That's right. I killed him. You have a problem with that?" When Gong Sun Li and Si Yanran heard this, they did not know how to react. A few seconds later, they were shocked. "No way. He admitted it? And he admitted it so easily? Are you crazy?" While Gong Sun Qian was being scolded in the face, he said sincerely in his heart, "Fine. You have guts, fine. Since you admit it, there's no need to say anything else. Thousand Dawn Spire has no history with you, but you killed my people for no reason. Based on the rules of the martial world, I have to avenge my disciple." Before Gong Sun Qian could finish, Gong Sun Qian was interrupted. "Wait a minute." Feng Bujue yelled to interrupt him. "Who said I killed your people for no reason?" "Oh." Gong Sun Qian's expression shifted. "You have a history with Wang Ao?" "No," Feng Bujue replied. "You have a history with Thousand Dawn Spire?" "No." "Humph. Then why did you kill him?" "He was harassing my wife," Feng Bujue said as he pointed his finger at passing rain. Gong Sun Qian was speechless. Not only him, Xiao Tan, Laughing Soul, and Atobi almost dropped their teacups on the table, but passing rain was calm. She still used that cold gaze to look at Feng Bujue like he owed her a lot of money, and the interest had just doubled. "Last night, when we entered the town, we saw your disciple, Wang Ao, walking toward us in a drunken state." Feng Bujue's ability to come up with lies was undeniable. He saw how beautiful my wife was, so he came forward to harass her. He spat on the ground. The man probably thought that none of us knew kung fu, so he was fearless. "How dare you speak rudely in front of me?" pointing at my wife and speaking frivolously. Feng Bujue glared at Gong Sun Qian fearlessly and scolded him indirectly. "I have always despised people like him who think they are good at kung fu and come from a powerful sect. At the time, I slapped him into pieces." He scoffed coldly. "Furthermore, I know my wife's temper better than anyone else. If I didn't make my move, she would have made her move, and the man would have died." Feng Bujue grumbled. "What? Boss, are you going to take revenge for him?" His words were like a checkmate to the man. As a case of a dead man telling no tales, there was nothing that could be refuted at first glance. Of course, the most important part of that statement was the part about thinking that none of the 5 of us knew kung fu. That was what Feng Bujue wanted everyone to hear. Combined with the part about the murder, it explained some things the people at the inn naturally knew about the 2 ways to enter Chonglin Town. At that moment, realization dawned on them. The 5 of them had some kind of skill that could hide their real power, but that was not surprising. They had not seen these people before in the martial world, so how could they have taken the main road to enter the town? Therefore, they must have taken a small path, and since they had taken the small path, they must be experts. This is just your side of the story. How can you? Gong Sun Qian was once again interrupted. "Ask the 2 beside you whether I'm telling the truth or not," Feng Bujue said confidently. His confidence was not without reason. He knew very well that the 2 beside the boss would help him cover up his lie. The reason was simple. To kill a person, one needed a motive. Unless Si Yanran and Gong Sun Li thought it would be more convincing to accuse Feng Bujue of being a murderer, they had no reason to refute this story. After all, the real culprit was Si Yanran. In reality, the person that she had framed had nothing to do with Wang Ao. Now that Feng Bujue had come up with a motive, that was a great help to her. Si Yanran stammered. "I did not see the murder." When I arrived, Wang Ao was already dead. Gong Sunli also lowered his voice to say, "Senior brother." I was even later. I did not see the conflict between Wang Ao and them, but I do not think they are lying. When he said this, he lowered his voice even more. Also, I have often heard some gossip that martial nephew Wang likes to flirt with women and is a womanizer by nature. At this point, Gong Sun Qian believed about 80% of Feng Bujua's story. This was because a few hours ago, Si Yinran and Gong Sun Li did not explain things clearly. Of course, they could not explain it clearly. But now, Wang Ao's death seemed to make sense. After listening to Feng Bujua's lie and Gong Sun Li's indirect questioning, Gong Sun Qian recalled that there were several times when Wang Ao seemed to be flirting with his master's wife. Then, he thought that Wang Ao was indeed handsome. The more Gong Sun Qian thought about it, the more he felt that it was true. The idea of revenge for his disciple was basically gone. What do you think? Tower Master, is what I said true? Feng Bujue raised his voice and declared confidently, "Today, I will say it right here and now. I am the one who killed him. If you say that I am wrong to kill him, then we will do it according to the rules of the martial arts world. Life and death are predestined. Let's see who is the real deal." Boss Gong's son, you have to give us an explanation. Ji Tong, who had been watching from the side for a long time, understood what was going on, so he gloated. The other martial artists present also believed that Feng Bujue was telling the truth. They whispered to each other and discussed animatedly. Their opinions were basically the same. This time, Thousand Dawnspire would not be able to clean up the mess. So it was their own disciple who had acted improperly and was killed on the spot because his skills were inferior. Could it be that they still wanted revenge? Wang Ao really did that frivolous act right in front of you? Gong Sun Qian asked. Feng Bujue knew that this lie could not stand up to scrutiny. Even if Wang Ao was drunk, and he was confident that the 5 people in front of him did not know any martial arts, as a disciple of a righteous sect, he would not do something like flirting with women on the street. Plus, Ryu's appearance in the game was not at the level of the beauty that could cause the fall of the city. It was not like Wang Ao had never seen a woman before. Logically speaking, the probability of this happening was not 0, but it was very low. What? Could it be that you think Wang Ao's actions do not deserve death? Feng Bujue suddenly revealed a ruthless expression. He took a step forward and grabbed Gong Sun Qian's collar. Then, if I say a few flirtatious words to your wife in front of Boss Gong's son, will you tolerate it? Feng Bujue looked furious, but he was actually very calm. His response was very sly. He did not directly answer Gong Sun Qian's question, but changed the topic to something else. It was as if there was no need to discuss the truth of the flirtatious words, and Gong Sun Qian was just looking for an excuse. Feng Bujue's reaction was out of everyone's expectations. Because Master Gong Sun was caught off guard, he failed to evade the man's outstretched hand. Gong Sun Qian had been in the martial world for a long time, but he had never encountered something like this before. In the martial world, if someone wanted to fight with you, they would fight. No one would grab you by the collar to threaten you. Even the Whale Gang, who used to be salt smugglers, would not do something like this. Young hero, please calm down. Gong Sun Qian didn't know how to respond. If he took this opportunity to strike the other party, that would be too despicable. So, he could only reply, "That's not what I meant." Oomph. Feng Bujue let go of the other party with a cold snort, but his expression was still very unhappy. His teammates gasped in amazement at his lifelike performance. Laughing Soul couldn't help but whisper into Xiao Tan's ear, "Movie King." Yeah. Xiao Tan also replied. Even Si Yinran, who was standing across from them, was confused. I was the one who killed Wang Ao last night, right? It should be me, right? Gong Sun Li and I teamed up to frame them, right? What kind of situation is this? Not only did this person take the blame for me, he even made up the story and acted as if it really happened. Is this person crazy? I haven't asked for young hero's name yet. Gong Sun Qian straightened his clothes and put on a more polite expression. At that moment, he understood that in terms of right and wrong, there was no point in arguing. Right now, It was obvious that the other party was in the right. Faced with the burning gazes of so many Jianghu fellows present, if he insisted to the end, he would only further humiliate himself. Broken Sword Chihitsu's leader, Feng Bujue. Feng Bujue greeted him with a fist salute. This was not an easy question to answer. Gong Sun Qian had never heard of this sect before, and he wasn't shameless enough to reply with a, "I've heard a lot about you." He had no choice but to change the topic. Master Feng, Wang Ao's actions have no sense of propriety, justice, integrity, or shame. Furthermore, he has violated the rules of the Thousand Dawn Spire. This person deserved to die, so it would be best to kill him. He called him by his name and no longer referred to him as a disciple. I did not investigate carefully enough and was careless in accepting a disciple. Young hero Feng, you helped Thousand Dawn Spire get rid of this scoundrel, but for some unknown reason, I offended you. Please forgive me. That's more like it. Feng Bujue sat down again and took a sip of his tea. He was not polite to Gong Sun Qian at all. He looked like he was saying, "I killed someone, and you think I'm in the right?" Not only was Master Feng not giving him any face, but he was also extremely arrogant. Gong Sun Qian's old face was a little embarrassed. Looking at Ji Tong's mocking expression, Gong Sun Qian felt a wave of anger rise from his feet to the top of his head. He thought to himself, I can't just sit back and swallow this insult. I have to find a way to get back at him. Of course, he couldn't just fight directly. He would be accused of bullying. Therefore, he decided to provoke him verbally. Even if they didn't fight, he could still humiliate him. With that thought, Gong Sun Qian said, Leader Feng, I've been in the martial world for many years. He smiled and said, but I've never heard of this sect called Broken Sword Chihitsu. Young hero, you're so young, but you're already so skilled in martial arts. You're also the leader of a sect. Who is your master? Where's your sect? Also, how many disciples do you have in your sect? Everyone, this is asking for trouble. If language was a weapon, Gong Sun Qian would be like a wooden stick, an ancient weapon, and Feng Bujue would be like an Jet Armstrong cannon. Oh, the corner of Feng Bujue's lips curled up to reveal a lewd smile. His expression caused goosebumps to rise all over Gong Sun Qian's body, and it gave him a very bad feeling. Naturally, Feng Bujue already knew what the man was thinking. He laughed coldly and replied, Well said, well said. I learned without a teacher and opened my own door. My sect does not have a fixed residence. Other than my wife and I, there are only 3 guests. Chapter 203. He said it loud and clear, in a tone that was not shameful, but rather proud of it. The crowd was shocked. Even Feng Bujue's friends were stunned. In the world of martial arts, saying self-taught was like saying, I have superpowers to someone in the real world. When the phrase self-taught was said after self-taught, it was enough to scare people to death. Ha ha! Drunk monk Lu San, who was leaning against the stairs and drinking, laughed loudly. Good. What a great self-taught method. The monk suddenly interrupted. I've been in Jianghu for many years, and I've seen many famous people. Many people can't live up to their fame. I've also seen many people who talk big. Most of them are just people who blow their own trumpet. They're not worth mentioning. He took another swig of the wine in the jar, and then raised his eyes to look at Feng Bujue. Someone as unknown as Master Feng who is able to utter such shocking words. This is the first time I've met someone like you. At this point, Lu San suddenly used the move Flying Snake offering wine. One of his arms curled up and suddenly stretched out. A whirlwind like a whip-spinning top acted on the wine jar at his arms. Monk, let me toast you. With a low shout, the wine jar flew out of Lu San's arm and flew toward Feng Bujue. Lu San looked rough and unrestrained, but he was actually very meticulous. He was not bad at scheming. This move of his had been carefully thought out. All the masters present could see that the high-speed spinning wine jar had hidden internal strength. It was impossible for ordinary people to block it. If he could catch the wine jar in his arm, then Feng Bujue had to be an expert in internal energy, and if he could break the jar with brute force, then he had to be an expert in external kung fu. Of course, there was also the possibility that he would be hit directly That would be very embarrassing. Lusan's actions seemed to be looking for trouble, but in reality, he was helping Feng Bujue. Because Brother Ju's words were too shocking, it could be said that the effect of mockery was outstanding, and everyone's aggro was instantly filled. Even the eminent monks of Shaolin, Scholar Renwu, and the Taoist priests of the free and unfettered sect shook their heads one after another. Not to mention the leaders of the other sects. Almost all of them showed a disdainful expression and sneered. As for the disciples of the lower sects and Jianghu wanderers, they could not bear to hear such arrogant words. At this moment, if Lusan had not made the first move, it was likely that some second-rate Jianghu figure would have jumped out immediately and shouted something like, "Sir, you sure talk big. I'm so-and-so from a certain sect, and I'd like to learn from you." Then, they would have stepped forward and exchanged 2 blows with Brother Ju. Lusan knew very well that the weaker a person's martial arts was, the more they did not know how to control their strength. It was fine if it was a first-class martial artist, but he was afraid that a few second-class or third-class bastards would appear and attack viciously, hurting people's bones. Now that the drunken monk had spoken, the juniors present, or those who knew their kung fu was inferior to the drunken monk, no longer dared to make a move. With a first-class martial artist like him testing the waters, everyone just had to watch. Lusan's own thought was, if Brother Feng could block the wine jar, that would be the best. Others would see his real kung fu and would not cause trouble for him. If he could not block it, this move of mine would not seriously injure him. At that time, he would feel ashamed and leave. That was a good idea. However, Feng Bujue's reaction was once again beyond everyone's expectations. When the drunken monk laughed, Feng Bujue realized what this NPC was going to do. So, he immediately took out Death Poker and hid it in his palm, preparing to defend himself. No matter how the other party attacked, Feng Bujue would use the same strategy to deal with all changes. Anyway, when faced with a slightly stronger attack, he only had the shield card as a safety measure. At this moment, the wine jar flew through the air and arrived in the blink of an eye. But only a crackling sound was heard. That wine jug shattered, shattering in midair. It was as if it had crashed into a wall of air. The wine inside splashed out, but did not pass through the invisible barrier. Feng Bujue sat in his chair without moving. He held the teacup in one hand, and the other hand dangled naturally under the table. From the beginning to the end, his expression was calm. When the wine jar crashed into the glowing force field, Feng Bujue turned to look at it from the corner of his eyes. The next second, he suddenly reached out and extended the teacup in his hand. At this moment, the shield card disappeared. Feng Bujue reached out and used the cup to catch the wine that was splashing down. Then, he pretended to hold the cup in front of him. This master is really generous. Feng Bujue looked at the wine cup in front of him. He said he wanted to give me a toast, but in the end, he gave me a jar. He smiled. But I'm not good at drinking, so this cup is enough. Then, he drank the small cup of wine in one gulp. The whole place was silent. When the experts saw this scene, they all sucked in a breath of cold air. They all asked the same question in their hearts. What kind of martial arts was that? Even though Si Yanran had already experienced this move last night, she still couldn't see through it when she looked at it again. In terms of inner chi cultivation, those whose chi is sluggish can be said to have achieved mastery through a comprehensive study. Those who can release chi can be said to have reached the point of perfection. Those who can transform chi into form can be said to have reached the peak. Suddenly, a gentle voice narrated in an unhurried manner. The rhythm of the narration was just enough to be heard by everyone present. When the voice fell, everyone looked towards the direction of the voice. Their eyes focused on a seat in the corner of the inn. Feng Bujue also looked up and saw a 20-year-old purple-clothed woman sitting alone. At first glance, this woman had a delicate body and a beautiful appearance. Her skin was white as snow and jade-like face. But if one looked carefully, one could say that she was like a flower in the moon, dignified and elegant. This was especially true for her eyes. Her charming eyes were like drops of autumn water, making it hard for anyone to forget her after a single glance. As the saying goes, beautiful in one's imagination, this was probably just it. This woman was called Mu Rong-yin. She was known as the fairy from beyond the clouds in the Jianghu. Although her skills could only be considered first-rate, her knowledge of martial arts was extremely profound. Everyone in the Jianghu said that if anyone could marry this young lady from the Mu Rong family, not only would they have great luck, they would also have half a master. However, it was also because of this reason that Mu Rong-yin had not married, even though she was already 25 years old. If someone came to propose marriage, she would directly send them away. If someone wanted to get close to her, she would stay away. After all, people's hearts were sinister. She could not tell who was sincere and who had ulterior motives, so she simply rejected all of them. And this young hero Feng's martial arts are at an even higher level. Mu Rong-yin continued what she had just said. Qi can be controlled outside the body, and the qi can be golden. It can turn nothing into something, and it can gather and disperse as it pleases. She looked straight at Feng Bujue and met his eyes. It has been 300 years since someone with this kind of inner energy cultivation has appeared in the Jianghu. I didn't think that I would be lucky enough to see it today. I am impressed, very impressed. Feng Bujue was overjoyed when he heard this. This beautiful woman was too awesome. Originally, he thought that his bluff would take some effort to achieve its effect, but he did not expect someone to take the initiative to cooperate with him. Furthermore, her words were so clear and logical that even he himself was a little stunned. As expected, Mu Rong-yin's words instantly hoodwinked everyone. This was a rather interesting phenomenon. When something strange happened, and no one knew what the truth was, suddenly, a person who was usually quite reliable came out to express his personal opinion. Then, regardless of whether the opinion was correct or not, it would most likely become the publicly acknowledged truth. Gong Sun Qian, who was standing closest to Feng Bujue, was completely dumbfounded. Originally, he had only been suspicious about the golden force field. But now, he was certain that this master Feng before him was truly an unparalleled master. Ha ha! Girl Mu Rong, you are quite knowledgeable. I knew this kid was not as simple as he seemed. Meng Jiu's laughter rang out. No one knew when he had appeared, but he was sitting on the threshold of the inn, leaning against the door frame and drinking. It was common knowledge that this leader of the beggars' sect would wait at the entrance of the village every night. When the crowd heard him say that he was not as simple as he seemed, they filled in the gaps in their minds. It was as if Master Feng had already fought with Meng Jiu for 300 rounds when he came to town last night, and in the end, he even won by hiding his true strength. As Meng Jiu laughed, he yelled at Lu San, who was far away, "Monk Lu, you screwed up. Ha ha! What a waste of that jar of wine of yours." Lu San was a straightforward person, and what happened just now did not make him lose face. In fact, it made him look good, so he laughed as well. Ha ha! Old beggar, I'm not as stingy as you. To be able to witness something like this, what is a jar of wine? Meng Jiu's appearance and his conversation with Lu San once again broke the short silence of the martial artists. The chatter in the guest hall rang out again. Everyone was talking, and the focus was now on the 5 people from Broken Sword Shahitsu. As for the stupid incident at Thousand Dawn Spire, it had long been forgotten. At this moment, another person on the 2nd floor of the inn spoke. I was wondering why it was so lively. So, it's because an important guest has arrived. The man who spoke was a white-robed swordsman. He looked to be less than 40 years old, and he had sharp eyebrows and bright eyes. Master Feng. He leaped lightly and took 2 steps in the air. He jumped from the 2nd floor to Feng Bujue's table and stood firmly. I've been waiting for a long time. Do I know you? Feng Bujue looked at him and asked. As soon as he said that, it caused another commotion. What? He said he doesn't know Lin Chong, the strongest of the Yi family's 6 flowery blades, and he said he doesn't know him. What is this Feng kid up to this time? It was normal for the people to be shocked because the person who was talking to Feng Bujue was the leader of the Yi family's 6 flowery blades. Compared to Gong Sun Qian and Ji Tong, his kung fu was probably better. Among the swordsmen, excluding Xie San and Yi Cheng, he should be the 3rd. Of course, there was still a huge gap between him and the other two. Huh. Lin Chong smiled and bowed. I am Lin Chong, Blue Sky Sword. I have been waiting for Master Feng for a long time. Do you mind if I invite the heroes of Broken Sword Chahitsu to come upstairs for a chat? Chapter 204. After Feng Bujue and the rest followed Lin Chong up to the second floor, the show in the morning finally came to an end. However, the discussion among the martial artists would not stop there. Feng Bujue's entrance into the martial world was definitely shocking. In fact, it could be said that he had, for a period of time, made the martial artists at Chonglin Town forget why they were there. Who was Feng Bujue? What kind of kung fu did he practice? How could someone in his 20s possess such amazing kung fu? When was Broken Sword Chahitsu founded? Was it really just a small sect? Or was there a bigger organization behind it? Other than Feng Bujue, how good were the other four? And so on, of course, on the second day. As more and more major events happened and the date of the duel approached, the people's focus shifted to other things. Let's put that aside for now and focus on the morning of the first day. After Feng Bujue and the rest were invited upstairs by Lin Chong, the people from Thousand Dawn Spire were embarrassed. They could only return to their seats and lower their heads to drink, not mentioning the incident before them. Gong Sun Qian had wanted to humiliate the other party to get back at him, but he didn't expect the other party to spout such arrogant words without hesitation. Then, the other party even revealed an incredible inner strength secret art, leaving everyone speechless. Seeing the mocking glances from Ji Tong's table at Octagonal Spire, Gong Sun Qian was furious. Soon, he stood up and left the inn hall. Just as he was about to head upstairs, Ji Tong said to him, Brother Gong Sun, don't forget to dispose of that piece of dog shit's body. Otherwise, it'll dirty the inn's place. Humph! Gong Sun Qian scoffed and did not reply to this provocation. What happened that day was not a great humiliation. It was over. If he were to get into a conflict with Ji Tong now, it would make Gong Sun Qian fly into a rage out of humiliation, which would cause him to lose his demeanor as an expert. As he went upstairs, Gong Sun Qian ordered his eldest disciple in a low voice, when no one is looking, take your juniors and bury Wang Ao's body in the mountain. Yes, disciple obeys, his disciple replied. Gong Sun Qian seemed to have thought of something and added, let's go through the back door. Yes, this disciple understands. The reopened Chonglin Inn had obviously been renovated. The size of the inn was twice as big as when it was abandoned many years ago. The inn had a total of 4 floors, and there were indeed quite a few rooms. There were more than 50 rooms upstairs and downstairs. They were divided according to heaven, earth, and human, and then arranged according to A, B, C. The furniture and decorations in each room were also slightly different. The situation at Copper Hillock County was mentioned earlier. Due to the negotiation at Copper Hillock County, in the end, most of the people from the various sects entered Chonglin on the same day. After entering the town, they naturally discovered that there was a shortage of rooms in the inn. It was impossible for a sect to occupy 20 rooms with only the sect master and 20 disciples, right? In that case, as long as the people on the second floor of the first mansion stayed inside, then would be full. Therefore, after some discussion, the various sects decided to share the rooms fairly. Even though the Thousand Dawn Spire was huge, in the end, they only occupied a total of 4 guest rooms. 1 room for the sect leader and his wife, another room for Gong Sun Li, another room for the 2 most senior disciples, and another room for the other 5 disciples. Of course, after Wang Ao's corpse was taken care of, the 5 disciples would become 4. As for the remaining 10 disciples, they could only stay outside the inn. When the sect leader had orders, they had to be at his beck and call. Similarly, the Octagon and also took up 4 rooms. After that, the other 3 sects and 4 groups only had 3 rooms each. As for the other sects, they only had 2 rooms at most. Some third-tier sect leaders had to gather in groups of 3 to 5 people to get a room in the inn. Their treatment was even worse than that of the head disciples of the large sections. Compared to these people, lone wolves like Lu San who had good kung fu and status in the martial world, had a big advantage. As long as they arrived early, they could get a room to themselves. At that moment, Feng Bujue's group followed Lin Chong to Sky Room C, which was one of the best rooms at the inn. Before the duel, only 7 people came from the Yi family. Other than the 6 flowery blades, it was Yi Hai. However, these 7 people had taken up the 7 best rooms in the inn. The Yi family was different from the other factions. As the sword god's own faction and the leader of the martial world, they did not need to discuss this kind of rule with others at Bronze Peak. To be honest, even if the Yi family booked the inn and did not allow outsiders to stay, the people from other factions would have nothing to say. At the end of the day, this duel was a private affair between Xie San and Yi Cheng. They did not invite anyone to watch the duel. It was because the news was leaked that so many people were attracted. This bunch of people who liked to join the fun had come uninvited to witness the epic duel. The Yi family did not take the tickets and did not chase them away. That was already very kind of them. If there was a fair distribution, that was between them. The Yi family had no reason to interfere. Young Master Feng. Lin Chong introduced them to Feng Bujue as soon as he entered the room. These 3 are my juniors. At that moment, 3 people were already seated in Sky Room C. They were obviously waiting for Feng Bujue's group to arrive. This is Master Feng. Lin Chong turned to his 3 companions and used his finger to point at the players. This is Madame Feng, and the other 3 are the heroes of Broken Sword Shahitsu. Lin Chang's brief introduction was enough of an introduction. Then, one of the people spoke. I am Sword and Bamboo, Miao Shaoqing. The person who spoke was a man around 30. He looked cultured and had a scholarly air about him. He was wearing a black robe, and his sword was leaning against the chair beside him. The sword and bamboo looked like a normal bamboo, about 1 meter long. Some people might believe it if it was a dog-beating stick, but if it was a sword, others might not even be able to tell which side was the hilt. Miao Shaoqing was ranked 5th among the 6 flowery blades. He was the lowest among the 4 blades, so he was the first to greet Feng Bujue. It's an honor to meet you, Feng Bujue said with a smile, but in his heart, he was thinking, it feels like there are a lot of weird names to remember. Autumn Orchid Sword, Su Tang. Tanhua Sword, Yi Mu Han. The next 2 to introduce themselves were both female swordsmen. They did not address themselves as I am, perhaps because they felt that it was inappropriate for them to address themselves as I am in front of Feng Bujue. Autumn Orchid Sword, Su Tang, was ranked 4th among the 6 blades. She was 26 years old. Although she was not extremely beautiful, she was still a beauty. She was very small in size. When she stood up, she was only 1.5 meters tall. As for the size of her upper body, it was extremely disproportionate to her height. It could be said that she was wearing a jade-towering gauze dress with snow as a peak. Even though she was wearing a beige outfit with a high collar, it was still difficult to hide her proud curves. The Tanhua sword, Yi Mu Han, looked a few years older than Su Tang. She exuded the aura of a tough woman. Her hair was tied up like a man's, and her skin was rough. Even her voice was rough. However, it was not to the point where it was hard to tell her gender. After all, she did not have an Adam's apple. Even though she had a handsome face, compared to a Tobi-sama, she was indeed more feminine. Greetings, ladies. Feng Bujue returned the greeting. Since they had introduced themselves, Xiao Tan and the rest had to at least introduce themselves out of courtesy. I am Wang Tanji. I don't have a nickname. Chapter 205. Actually, it was not that Xiao Tan did not have a nickname, but the nervous fighter did not sound like a title that a martial artist should have. In reality, of the 5 people present, only Feng Bujue's title of unpredictable fanatic could be spread far and wide. For example, Passing Rain's elemental swordsman, Laughing Soul's sharp gunman, and Atobi-sama's high-profile ambush. At least in the eyes of this group of people from the wuxia world, their meaning was unclear and hard to understand. Li Ru Aoyu, Xiaoling Gu. After all, this was not the world of lightning, so Passing Rain and Laughing Soul could not be counted as names. Therefore, Passing Rain and Laughing Soul gave their real names. Air. Atobi-sama hesitated for 2 seconds. Jean Fugue. When they heard that name, even Fong Bujue almost burst out laughing, and Passing Rain was trying her best to hold it in. Xiao Tan and Laughing Soul had completely lost their minds. Both of them punched Atobi-sama's shoulders and could not stop laughing. Ha ha! So that's how it is. Ha ha! They laughed until tears were coming out of their eyes, and this confused the 4 NPCs standing opposite them. Oh, this is one of my 3 guests. He loves to joke around. Fong Bujue explained to the NPCs with a natural expression. This is a joke that only they understand, and I believe they could not help but laugh out loud. If there is any disrespect, please forgive them. His explanation was not that convincing, but Lin Chong and the rest did not think too much about it. From their perspective, at most, the boy had given a fake name and was laughed at by his peers. But in reality, Atobi-sama had indeed given his real name. In the middle of the 21st century, for a person who grew up in a big city to be given such a name by his parents, the feeling of growing up was something that could only be understood and forgotten. Ha! Master Fong, you're being too serious. Lin Chong was the first of the 6 flowery blades, and he was also the oldest, so he was naturally experienced and considerate. He then nonchalantly said, Come, come, come. Please sit. We can talk after sitting down. He led the people from Broken Sword Chahitsu to a large table in the room and sat down. As Fong Bujue took his seat, he changed the topic. By the way, I wonder why you have invited us here. Is there anything we can help you with? We are not worthy of the honor, Mu Muhan said. Yi Muhan said, based on the skill Master Fong showed downstairs just now, I'm afraid it's more than enough for you to teach us. Haha, you flatter me. Fong Bujue's smile was as fake as it could be. He was thinking, Miss, don't tell me you want to personally test my kung fu skills again. If that's the case, I'll be in deep trouble, Master Fong. Lin with a smile, Lin Chong, and the others. Lin Chong smiled and said, Even old man, ye has a whole new level of respect for your martial arts. That's rare. I'm afraid Master Fong will not be able to find a match among your peers, right? No. Fong Bujue opened his right palm and pointed at Passing Rain. Among my peers, there is someone here who is more powerful than me. The expressions of the 4 NPCs changed several times. They were getting more and more confused about this Master Fong. From the expression on his face, it was impossible to tell which of his words were true and which were false. Even from the content of his words, it was hard to tell the truth. For example, if what Fong Bujue said was true, it meant that this Miss Lee was more powerful than her husband. Then, wouldn't that mean that she was at least at the same level as the 6 flowery blades? But if what he said was false, then it was just a joke. Other than proving that this Master Fong might be a henpecked husband, it had no other meaning. Even Lin Chong, the most shrewd of them all, felt that the situation was tricky. Over the years, he had interacted with countless people in the martial world. He knew very well that the most difficult people to deal with were those who looked crazy but were actually calm and scheming. This kind of person could use a joking tone to tell the truth and could also use a serious attitude to talk nonsense with you. Both the truth and the falsehood were unpredictable. No one knew what this kind of person was thinking, and no one could predict what they would do. Fong Bujue quickly added, By the way, Brother Lin, is this elderly that you mentioned the senior that I met on the small road outside the town? Yes, Lin Chong said. Fong Bujue asked tentatively, I wonder if that elder is related to all of you? Actually, the information that Fong Bujue knew was limited. Even though he had gotten some basic information about the town from Meng Jie the previous night, and he knew that the old man that he had sparred with on the path was Yi Hai, the butler of the Yi family. But as for the 6 flowery blades, Fong Bujue knew nothing. Even the words 6 flowery shadow swords were something he had heard from the discussions of the people around him when he was in the inn's lobby. So, the question that Fong Bujue threw out was rather vague. He did not take the initiative to say Yi Hai's name. He only asked further questions based on what Lin Chong said, hoping to lead Lin Chong to reveal more information. On the other hand, Lin Chong and the rest thought that Master Fong had only heard of the famous 6 flowery blades and did not know who Yi Hai was. That was why he asked such a question. So, Lin Chong replied, Elder Yi is the butler of the Yi family, so we naturally know him. But he rarely gets involved in the pugilistic world, so it's not strange that Master Feng doesn't know him. Even though he only shared some information that I already knew from his tone, I can deduce that the 6 flowery blades are also from the Yi family. Feng Bujue thought. They invited us up so politely, probably because that old man, Yi Hai, has already given them a heads up. Another thought crossed his mind. But why didn't they invite us up when we first entered the inn? From what Yimu Han said, they should have been observing the movements on the first floor for a long time. The conclusion came almost instantaneously. They want to see our strength with their own eyes before they decide whether to negotiate with us. Many thoughts flashed through his mind in an instant, and they were all carried out in an orderly manner in Feng Bujue's mind. His expression, including his eyes, did not change at all. Every nerve and every muscle on this fellow's face was like the camouflage of a chameleon. As long as he was willing, he could completely hide his emotions. This half-smile, solemn yet harmonious face could be said to be a natural talent. Oh, no wonder, no wonder, Feng Bujue replied pretentiously. Lin Chong continued. It was Elder Ye's idea to invite all of you here. He asked us to settle all of you down in the inn. His gaze swept across the guest room. This Sky Room C was originally Old Man Ye's room, but ever since he came to town, he didn't step in at all. It's been empty all this time. As for the reason, I'm sure you all know, Master Feng. So, Elder Yi wants to do you a favor and let Master Feng have a guest room. He invites the 5 of you to stay here for 2 days. If you don't mind. What are you talking about? This is exactly what we want. Feng Bujue put on a grateful expression. I thank the 4 of you and Elder Yi for your kindness. At this moment, Brother Bujue was thinking that old thing is really something. He eats wind and drinks smoke and doesn't sleep or rest. Could it be that this is the legendary existence that can replace sleep by meditating and can last 3 to 5 days by drinking a few mouthfuls of dew? No need to be so polite, Lin Chong said. Our Yi residence is naturally happy to make friends with a young hero like Master Feng. Now that we're done with the formalities and the benefits have been given, can we talk about that matter now? Yi Muhan interjected calmly. Even though her tone was normal, her words were still quite harsh. Lin Chong hurriedly tried to salvage the situation by saying, Master Feng, to be honest, there is indeed one more thing that we need your help with. Feng Bujue smelled the scent of a mission flag. He immediately said, Just say it. I heard from Elder Yi that Master Feng is a person with innate pure yang inner energy? Lin Chong asked. Feng Bujue remembered the skill he used when he fought with Yi Hai and immediately understood. It was most likely that after Yi Hai was hit by a fire-type combat skill, he came to the conclusion that Feng Bujue had innate pure yang inner energy. This was similar to the theory that the beauty downstairs had said about him, controlling qi outside his body, turning nothing into something. They were both wrong conclusions based on wrong information. Isn't it obvious? Feng Bujue asked. His answer was as good as not answering. What was obvious about it? Obvious? Obviously not. Senior brother, let me say this myself, Su Tong suddenly said. She looked at Feng Bujue and said, To be honest with you, Master Feng, I have a favor to ask of you this time. She paused for a moment, then continued. A few months ago, the mental cultivation method I cultivated, Dark Nether Mantra, had reached the peak of the 7th level. However, due to the limitations of my inner energy, I was unable to break through the bottleneck with my own strength. She had a difficult expression on her face. Because I have innate pure inner energy, if I want to forcefully break through the Qi gate, I need someone with pure yang inner energy to assist me when I'm trying to break through the Qi gate. Su Tong had no other choice, so she had to ask for help. The growth of one's inner energy was related to one's innate talent. If she relied on herself and cultivated using conventional methods, she would only reach the 8th level of Dark Nether Mantra by the age of 30 at the earliest. Feng Bujue interrupted her and scanned everyone with a curious gaze. This Miss Sue, could it be that your two seniors and juniors are? Lin Chong said. Master Feng, you might not know this, but to suppress my junior sister's innate pure inner energy is not something an ordinary person can do. It has to be at least a virgin who has cultivated inner energy for more than 20 years, and someone who has cultivated a yang-type mental cultivation method. My inner energy is also on the soft side, Miao Shaoqing added. Even though Big Senior Brother has yang-type inner energy, he is already married, so he does not meet the requirements. I'm also married, Feng Bujue said immediately. That is not a problem, because Master Feng has innate pure yang inner energy, so his innate talent is different from a normal person's, Su Tong said. Feng Bujue was still trying to come up with a solution. By the way, since you are called the 6 blades of flowery shadow, then there should be 2 blades. Oh, my 6th junior sister, Lu Qingning, is also a female, Miao Shaoqing replied. Second senior brother, Shadowless Sword, Shang Fei, cultivates an inner energy method that balances yin and yang. Ha! Speaking of which, there are so many heroes gathered at Chonglin. Feng Bujue laughed drily, still hoping that he could get away with it. Of course, he knew that this was going to be troublesome. Even though the martial world was huge, those who could be called elites were all gathered there. If there were other suitable candidates in the inn, the Yi residents would have dealt with that person long ago, even if it was through coercion and bribery. The only reason they came to Feng Bujue was because there was no one who met the requirements. For martial artists, the increase in level was the most important thing. If Su Tong really waited until she was 30 before she reached the 8th level of the Nether Mantra, then she would only have one choice in the next few years, which was to change to another type of martial art as a supplementary mantra. This was because even if she continued to practice the original Nether Mantra, it would be difficult for her to improve much. It would only be a waste of time. To put it more seriously, these few years of delay would affect the level she could reach in her lifetime. The 6 blades were as close as brothers. They were also troubled by Su Tong's problem. Actually, if Su Tong's innate talent was normal, there would not be so much trouble. Anyone with 6 blades could help her break through, and the bottleneck would be over. However, she had innate pure inner energy. Thus, Feng Bujue, due to a series of coincidences, became their only choice. If he had randomly gotten a skill when he used Eat My Move last night, as long as it was not a fire attribute skill, there would not be this much trouble. For example, if it was an ice attribute skill, perhaps Yi Hai would misunderstand that Feng Bujue was the successor of the Xian Ming Divine Palm. The problem was that he had been misunderstood as someone with innate pure yang inner energy. He could not admit that he had no inner energy and did not know any martial arts, right? If this news was leaked, he would be beaten to death the moment he stepped out. Seeing that Feng Bujue seemed to be in a difficult position, Yi Mu Han slammed the table. Brat, we are sincerely begging you, but you're making all kinds of excuses. What is the meaning of this? It's just transferring some true chi to my junior sister. How difficult is it? It won't affect your foundation. At most, after it's done, the Yi family will give you a few great recovery pills as repayment for your true chi. Yi Mu Han still had an arrogant attitude. Her personality was blunt, and so was her words. However, this couldn't be considered a problem. A straightforward person usually wasn't bad in nature. Furthermore, she was the best swordswoman in the martial arts world and Yi Cheng's sister. If she did not have this kind of pride, it would be abnormal. It's not that he doesn't want to help, Passing Rain suddenly said, but he is unable to help. What do you mean? Yi Mu Han looked at Passing Rain and asked. The martial arts our sect cultivates are different from any other sect in the current martial arts world. You should have noticed that our inner strength, skills, and other things, you can't see them on the surface. Passing Rain began to bluff her way out of the situation. Indeed, your martial arts are completely flawless. Lin Chong nodded. Passing Rain glanced at Feng Bujue. Brother Bujue, he does have innate pure yang inner energy. He is extremely talented and created his own school. However, he practices a martial art that he came up with on his own. He doesn't even have the most basic knowledge about other martial arts. Therefore, he doesn't know how to transfer true qi to others or how to protect them. She sighed softly. Sigh. It's not that Brother Jude doesn't want to help, but what you're asking of him is too much. Haha, you are the one who is most reliable at this crucial moment. Feng Bujue was overjoyed. Since passing rain had helped him, Feng Bujue acted like the owner of Urahara Inn and said in a low voice, "That's right, my martial arts are for killing, not for—" "Ah, is that so?" Lin Chong interrupted with a smile. "That's fine. If Master Feng doesn't mind, I will teach you the most basic set of inner energy cultivation techniques. In half a day, Brother Feng will be able to master the method of transferring true qi." Feng Bujue, F*CK. You're forcing me to do this. I have to help you no matter what. Since that's the case, I will not shirk my responsibility. Everyone, please don't worry. I will do my best to help Miss Su improve her martial arts. Feng Bujue put on an expression of acceptance. He waited for the four people's expressions to lighten before he changed the topic. However, if I ask Brother Lin for a cultivation technique, it will be considered as learning the Yi family's martial arts. I wonder if Master Yi will, young Master Feng, please don't worry. I will only teach you the basic cultivation technique of the Yi family's disciples. It's not some secret of the family. Master Yi won't mind. Lin Chong said directly. Besides, the final battle for the Master Yi family is imminent. For such a small matter, it doesn't seem appropriate to send a messenger pigeon to ask for instructions. It's just martial arts practitioners exchanging some basic skills. It's not like he wants to take you in as a disciple. At this time, Yi Muhan used a more direct and unpleasant way to say, Lord Feng thinks that this matter will be used as evidence in the future, and people will say that you were taught by Azure Sky Sword. Then, you should teach my senior martial brother Lin some superficial martial arts as a gift in return. Ha! Misty, you must be joking. What kind of skill do I have that I can teach Master Lin? Feng Bujue still replied politely. He knew that this was a mission where he could learn some kind of skill, but he could not accept it immediately because Lin Chong said that he could learn it in half a day. That meant that half a day later, the fact that he had no internal energy would be exposed. Therefore, Feng Bujue's plan was to buy time and wait for him to come up with a solution before accepting the mission. What he said earlier was to get the other party to ask for Yi Cheng, who had not shown up in town. Wasting half a day was not a bad thing, but to his surprise, Lin Chong said that there was no need for that. Now, he had to come up with another excuse. Master Lin, I wonder if you can wait until tomorrow to teach my husband the cultivation technique? Passing Rain asked again. Oh, why is that? There is something unique about our sex kung fu. You all saw what Brother Bujue did downstairs earlier, Passing Rain explained calmly. It was impossible to tell that she was making it up. Even though it is impressive, there is a price to pay. As for the specific reason, I'm afraid that within today, he will— Yes. That's it. Feng Bujue suddenly interrupted Passing Rain loudly and winked at her. Of course, that was part of the act. When the other four saw this, they immediately believed that this matter was true, because Feng Bujue looked like if Passing Rain continued, she would expose the weakness of Broken Sword Shahitsu's kung fu. Oh ha! Since it's not convenient today, we can wait for another day, Lin Chong said. Fourth sister, you won't mind waiting another day, right? Of course, Su Tang replied and bowed at Feng Bujue. Su Tang would like to thank Master Feng in advance. Chapter 206. After exchanging some pleasantries, Feng Bujue received the key to Heaven Room C. Then, the four of them bade farewell and left. Item name, key item type, plot item quality, normal function. The holder and their team will gain the ownership of Sky Room C at Chonglin. Can be taken out of the scenario. Yes, remark. Even if you don't have the key with you, as long as your team has it, you can enter and exit the room freely. Oh, this thing can be transformed into a puzzle card after the scenario ends. Feng Bujue read the item description. You should let Passing Rain carry this. You're the strongest here, so you won't die so easily. You have more space in your inventory than I do. Hey, I'm the one with the highest level here, and I'm a professional. No matter how you look at it, it's me who is stronger, right? Atobi chimed in. Fong Bujue changed the topic. Speaking of profession, I have a plan that I need your help with. Huh? What plan? Atobi asked. Do you still remember the beauty who commented on my kung fu on the first floor of the inn? Fong Bujue asked. Yes, that Meng Jiu mentioned. Her surname is Morong? Atobi replied. At the time, I was eavesdropping on the discussion of the group of NPCs. From the bits and pieces that they said, this Miss Morong should be a character similar to Bai Shaosheng. Fong Bujue scratched his chin. In other words, she has a large amount of information. You want me to go and get information from her? Atobi asked. Yes, after all, you're professional. Fong Bujue replied. Just use your professional skills to strike up a conversation with her. After the conversation starts, tell her that you're new to the world and have many questions that you don't know, so you wish to ask her some questions. When I said profession, I was referring to a professional gamer. You're talking about a professional gigolo, right? Atobi yelled. Don't worry, I'm not asking you to sell your body. I'm just asking you to communicate with him. Fong Bujue ignored the grumbling and continued. The interaction between players and humanoid NPCs can also be referred to Item D of the Player Interaction Regulations. Regardless of gender, any behavior determined by the system to be sexual harassment, including the intention to use the methods listed in clauses B and C, will be restricted by the system. The player's intention will not be converted into the character's actual actions. Repeated attempts will be forcibly disconnected, and the player's citizen ID will be permanently added to the system's blacklist, becoming a high-priority monitoring target. I also looked into the specific details of interactions between players, humanoid NPCs, and monsters, and found that the restrictions were even stricter than the interactions between players. Players could still engage in a certain degree of intimacy if both parties were willing, but there would never be any erotic interactions between players and virtual avatars. NPCs would also never do anything to players in that way. However, he could not rule out the possibility that the NPCs would develop a good impression of the players. In short, you can boldly strike up a conversation. You definitely won't be taken advantage of. Hey, that was a beauty. It's not like she's some kind of hunk. Don't make it sound like I've profited from this. Not being taken advantage of is the true loss. Atobi replied. Speaking of which, you managed to memorize the rules word for word, and you even managed to explain so clearly about the rule of not being able to date in different dimensions. What kind of mentality is that? Oh, about that. It's because I hugged a female NPC in a certain scenario. Of course, it was a very pure platonic hug. Fong Bujue answered calmly. Then I thought of a question, where is the limit of this setting? Therefore, I took some time to read up on the related game description. Sigh, then wouldn't it be much easier for us girls to seduce male NPCs? Laughing Soul joked. After all, nothing will happen to us. I say, girl, you have to respect yourself. Xiaodan turned around and looked at her with a burning gaze. How do you plan to seduce them? Fong Bujue said. Any subjective action will be banned by the system. Objectively speaking, even if you want to show them your thighs or give them some benefits, you won't be able to change your appearance and scenario, right? You have a point. Laughing Soul nodded as she glanced at Xiao Tan with a mocking gaze. Actually, based on her tone, it was not that she did not know the answer to this question. Perhaps she just wanted to see the person's reaction after hearing it. All right, Jean Fugue, what do you say? Are you going or not? Fong Bujue asked. I'm warning you. You can call me a gigolo. Before Atobi could finish, Chingu interrupted him. Fine, gigolo, what do you think? Fong Bujue interrupted him. If I'm not married, I'll go on my own. With my glib tongue and pestering ability, there's no reason for me to fail in the negotiation. But based on the current situation, I'll definitely attract Miss Murong's ire. You can't let Xiaoting go, right? We'll be lucky if the kid doesn't leak our information. It's just a negotiation. Why can't we girls do it? Passing Rain asked. Ha ha ha. Fong Bujue guffawed 5 times before adding. That's a good idea. I've always wanted to know 2 women who don't know each other, and one of them is obviously trying to get close to the other, What kind of opening statement should be used? Passing Rain glared at Feng Bujue. After a long silence, she said, "Fine, you should let the professional do it." "All right, you two can stop acting. I'll give it a try," Atobi said weakly. "But I have to make it clear, if the NPC ignores me, there's nothing I can do." "Of course not. Gigolo, why do you have to look down on yourself?" Feng Bujue drawled. "Someone as handsome and feminine as you definitely has a market among older women in ancient times. Even if she doesn't like you, facing someone who looks weak and hasn't done anything out of line, she'll at most politely say that she doesn't have anything in common with you and ask you to stop harassing her." Feng Bujue paused before continuing. "And if Miss Moron doesn't think there's anything wrong with talking to you, then things will be much easier." He stood up. "If my analysis is not wrong, this NPC should at least know most of the settings of this wuxiao world like the back of her hand. Things that are common knowledge to her are valuable information to us. So, for information that only we don't know about, you could try your best to ask her." "I know. I'll play it by ear," Atobi replied. At this moment, that Miss Morong should still be sitting in the inn lobby. "You've caused such a commotion earlier. If I, a guest from Broken Sword Shihitsu, go down now and greet her with so many people watching, it'll be hard for her to respond. I think we should find another time." "Yes, that's what I'm thinking." Feng Bujue nudged the key on the table to Passing Rain. The latter accepted it silently and placed it inside her backpack. "Let's talk about the second thing," Feng Bujue said. "It's about the 6 flowery blades, and now they need the help of someone with pure yang internal energy like me, even though it's been delayed for a day. Tomorrow, when that Lin Chong finishes teaching you the Kung Fu, and Su Tang needs you to protect her, the fact that you don't have internal energy will be exposed," Laughing Soul said. "Solving this problem is far more important than collecting information, because once this is messed up, we'll be in a very bad situation. Then, even if the 6 flowery blades don't directly become enemies with us, they won't have any reason to protect us, and they won't give us any benefits." "You're right, this is very tricky," Feng Bujue agreed. "Currently, I have 2 solutions in mind. The first one, I highly recommend: kill Su Tang." Passing Rain immediately voiced out Feng Bujue's thoughts. "Yes," Feng Bujue answered decisively. "And the best solution is to do it without her body being found. No one will know whether she's dead or alive. That way, at least before the duel, no one will bring up the matter of protecting her anymore." "You're too cruel." Atobi looked at Feng Bujue with shock. "Last time, when I saw you kill the zombies, I had this feeling that you're a homicidal maniac. Now, to keep the secret, you don't care whether the person is a good person or a bad person. You're going to kill them without hesitation. When you were playing Mario, before you killed Chestnut Boy, did you consider whether the person was a good or bad person?" Feng Bujue asked. Atobi was startled, and several seconds later, he frowned. "That's not the same thing, is it?" "TSK." Feng Bujue turned his head away with annoyance. "You're trying to change the concept," Passing Rain commented succinctly. "That failed," Laughing Soul added. "I'm also against killing people. The fact that she might be as powerful as a boss aside. Even if we can kill her, there's no guarantee that we won't be discovered during the fight and when we deal with the body." Shouten also gave a constructive suggestion. "There's no need to worry about that. If we really want to kill her, I have my ways. After we kill her, we'll cut her into 6 pieces, wrap her up in rags, and shove her into our backpack. No one will know," Feng Bujue added. "You've already planned to this extent." Atobi was covered in cold sweat, thinking, just what kind of person is this? "But you have a point." Feng Bujue changed the topic. "You did remind me of something. I've read a thread on the forum. It said that the player's way of doing things in a scenario might affect their future growth. For example, those who follow certain morals and principles in the scenario and try their best to do good will have a better ending after clearing the scenario. And for those who had been doing evil and cruel things in the script, the plot that they encountered might be more depressing. Not only that, the thread also said that the skills and items that the player receives are related to the player's way of doing things." "Huh. Shadow of the Demonic Bat." Xiao Tan's first reaction was to recite the name of the skill that Feng Bujue had given him. An unpredictable madman. Laughing Soul added, if this setting really exists, it can explain quite a lot of the situations that I've encountered in solo matches, Feng Bujue said. Is this considered a type of non-dominant attribute? Passing Rain asked. Perhaps. Based on this speculation, the players who are seen as lawful and kind by the system and the players who are chaotic and evil will be completely different in the later stages of the game. Not only skills, equipment, and titles, their gaming experience will be different as well, Feng Bujue said thoughtfully. In that case, we'd better not kill the innocent. Within the scope of the main quest, we should try our best to stand on the side of justice and do what is right. That way, we won't be seen as villains by the system like me. Atobi then asked, then, what is your second solution? If we can't kill her, then we can injure her. Feng Bujue said, if Su Tang is injured to a certain degree and temporarily loses the ability to clear the Dark Spirit mantra, then wouldn't this matter be delayed? He looked at the group. The game time is limited, and we won't be able to stay until the 4th day. So, as long as we can drag this out until the evening of the day after tomorrow, this matter will be over. That's not a bad idea, Laughing Soul said. Laughing Soul said in a low voice, but we need to discuss how to injure that Miss Su. That's right. First, we can't injure her openly, so we can only ambush her, Feng Bujue said. Second, we can't let her suspect that we're behind this. He crossed his arms before his chest and shook his head. If we have Laughing Soul ambush her from afar, we can easily accomplish the first point. But then, they will definitely suspect us. This is because only a bunch of weirdos like us can use a method that they can't even explain to ambush her. Even if we use a method that other martial artists would use to ambush her, we'll still be the most suspicious. Xiao Tan said, you just accepted the 6 slashes today, and in one day, Su Tang was ambushed and injured. To be honest, even if someone else ambushed her during this period of time, we'll be the ones to be suspected. I've thought of a method that won't be suspected, Feng Bujue said. And it's the most ideal method, mass poisoning. Your way of thinking, Atobi was speechless. Feng Bujue's way of thinking was too unpredictable, and he would always jump to a ridiculous conclusion. The theory is simple. Feng Bujue explained. To cover up the fact that we're targeting Su Tang, we'll ambush everyone at the same time. This way, on the surface, it will look like she's just been poisoned by someone who isn't specifically targeting her. Ha! Ha ha! Try to stand on the side of justice and do the right thing. Xiao Tan narrowed his eyes, and his lips twitched as he repeated Feng Bujue's words. Feng Bujue pretended not to hear him and continued. To achieve a realistic effect, we can also pretend to be collectively poisoned during the incident to fool the public. Have you lost your mind? Atobi said, there's no other way. To ensure that a lie won't be exposed, we have to come up with a bigger lie. Feng Bujue said, at this moment, we're already in this situation. You have to understand that our current safety and freedom are all built on a foundation of lies. Once one of them is exposed, the whole series of illusions will collapse. To have a foothold in this town, or rather, to survive, we have to try our best to keep up the pretense until the end. We have to try our best to maintain the mysterious and powerful image of Broken Sword Chahitsu at every second. If the people outside find out about our real power, this scenario will be very difficult to continue. In that situation, the only solution I can think of is to hide in the mountains. The premise is that we can leave this town, know this street alive. That's right, Passing Rain agreed. In terms of fighting ability, if 3 NPCs with the same power level as the woman from last night come, we'll have to use our guns, or else we'll be wiped out. She looked at Feng Bujue. At this stage, if Bujue's actions are exposed, then in the eyes of the people in this world, we'll be deceiving the world. Then, almost everyone will have the chance to fight us. Feng Bujue added, in any case, if we really get into a full-on fight, when the heroes see through our plan and learn about the basic properties of guns, we'll be dead. Either we keep up the pretense, or we'll become the public enemy, Xiao Tan said darkly. Feng Bujue shrugged. It's like a Jew who accidentally wandered into Hitler's party during World War II. The only way for him to leave alive is to make the people around him think that he's a German. Let's talk about the poisoning then, Atobi said. If we succeed, we'll have achieved our goal and won't be suspected. Or rather, even if Six Sword suspects us, they won't be able to confirm it, Feng Bujue replied. Xiaodan thought about it and said, as long as there's poison, anyone can do it. If only a few people are poisoned, then the target of suspicion will soon be someone who has a conflict of interest or resentment with the poisoned person. But if it's a large-scale poisoning that doesn't seem to be targeted, then it'll be hard to find the culprit. As long as we don't give ourselves away when we commit the crime, and we're poisoned after the incident, then, fine, there are 3 questions. Laughing Soul could not help but interrupt. 1. Where are we going to find a poison that won't kill anyone, and that has to be enough to feed more than 10 people? 2. How are we going to spread the poison evenly among the people at the inn? 3. How are we going to carry out the first and second steps without being discovered and without leaving any trace behind? Good question, Feng Bujue said. He tilted his head and shrugged. I have no clue. Then why are you talking so enthusiastically? That's why I said this is the most ideal method. As for how to do it, Feng Bujue said, we still have 1 day and 1 night to figure it out. Chapter 207. The discussion on the poisoning plan temporarily came to an end. Feng Bujue's group then discussed the plan for the rest of the day. Atobi-sama's main mission that day was to gather information. He planned to ask the workers at the inn about Mu Rongyin's room, and then pay her a visit to see if the NPC would be willing to let him teach her a thing or two. This looked like an easy task, and there was no risk involved, but in reality, there was still some difficulty. The problem at hand was how to get the information out of the innkeeper's mouth. The players did not have anything that could be used as currency in this world, so it would be difficult to get information from them without giving them a tip. Feng Bujue did not think too much about the problem of money. Actually, this was quite troublesome. If not for the fact that the 6 flowery blades had given them this sky room, even if there was an empty room at the inn, Feng Bujue would not have been able to afford it. Of course, in Feng Bujue's initial plan, he did not consider the problem of paying the bill. After all, they would disappear into thin air in 2 days, so the manager could ask whoever he wanted. The players did not care about their reputation. Furthermore, even if Atobi-sama managed to find out which room Mu Rong-in was staying in, his attitude and choice of words during the negotiation had to be carefully considered. The so-called professional gigolo was naturally just a joke. Atobi-sama understood that Feng Bujue had built an image of I will kill whoever dares to flirt with my wife in the eyes of the martial artists. Therefore, it was impossible for Brother Bujue to have a private conversation with a beautiful woman. If he did, it would either prove that he was a hypocrite or that he was prepared to be hacked to death by his wife. To put it bluntly, it would not only be of no help to the progress of clearing the scenario, it would also negatively affect the negotiation with the NPC. With regards to Xiaotan, even though Atobi-sama did not know him that well, from their interaction, even if the kid could not be described as innocent and kind, at least he was not a shrewd person. This kind of person was not suitable for intelligence work. Therefore, it could not be helped that Atobi would be the one to negotiate. He was, after all, the owner of a gaming studio. Even if he wasn't as good as experts like Laughing at the Heavens, he wasn't any worse than the average player. From the game's perspective, this was just a test of the player's ability to communicate with NPCs. As long as he followed the worldview of the script, politely and reasonably, there was no reason that he would not be able to get any information out of him. Even if it was a video game from 70 years ago, the NPCs in the city would at least repeat the same sentence to the players. In today's optical computer era, how could there be no such thing as a lack of answers? As for the 4 members of the Underworld Frontline, they had planned to split into 2 groups. Feng Bujue and Passing Rain went up the mountain from the north of town to explore the ruined temple in the forest north of the village mentioned in the plot introduction. Xiao Tan and Laughing Soul combed through the empty houses in the town to look for items and skills. This grouping was suggested by Feng Bujue. Of course, his basis was not that it would be less tiring for both men and women, but that it was the safest and most efficient arrangement considering the actual situation of the scenario. When Feng Bujue listened to the plot introduction, he noticed that the introduction did not explicitly state whether there were ghosts in this world or not. It only used the term rumor, and at the end, there was a confusing sentence. What was the result of this duel? What is the truth behind this ghost town? Is there a hidden conspiracy behind all this? This kind of introduction appeared to provide some information, but it was more like a guide to mislead the players. From the beginning to the end, the players could not be sure that the town was really haunted, but they could not be sure that it was the work of a human. Therefore, for the sake of insurance, Feng Bujue decided to treat the rest of the rumor as the truth. Even if the ruined temple on the mountain was really haunted by evil spirits, the combination of him and Passing Rain should be able to deal with it. He had Death Poker, and Passing Rain's elemental swordsman title and skill were the bane of spirits. The combination of the two was powerful. They were both brave and cunning. In broad daylight, if they went to the temple to check out the flag, they would not be gone forever, right? On the other hand, it was not wise for them to act alone when they were searching the town. If something unexpected happened, like what happened the night before, it would be very dangerous to be alone. There were many abandoned houses in Changlin town. Other than the houses around the inn that were already occupied, it was hard to tell what they would run into in the other houses. If someone was hiding a body, poison, or weapon in a secluded corner, and they were discovered by the players, there might be a fight. With Xiao Tan and Laughing Soul conducting the search, it was much safer. After all, they were both players with guns. When facing a humanoid NPC, they could fire to protect themselves. Furthermore, their combination complemented each other. If they encountered puzzle-solving elements, Laughing Soul would deal with them, and Xiao Tan would do the dirty work of moving things around. Even if they were noticed by outsiders, it would be fine. At most, they would suspect that they were looking for a place to do something dirty. They would not know that they were searching for game items. In conclusion, the plan for the day was to split into 3 groups. One to collect information, one to search for items, and the last group to follow the only clue that the system had provided. The 5 agreed to meet up at the inn before sunset. If no one showed up, the rest would come up with a plan. The morning passed quickly. In the lobby of Changlin Inn, the seats were even more packed. The bosses from the top guilds usually went downstairs for morning tea and had their other 2 meals in the guest room. During the day, the people who sat in the main hall of the inn drinking tea and eating were basically the martial artists who lived outside the inn. The number of these people was much larger than those who stayed at the inn, so the lobby was even busier than it was in the morning. Due to the limited number of seats, the group of martial artists knew their place. Those who were there to eat left after finishing. Those who were there to drink tea left after about 10 minutes. During this period of time, there were many people entering and leaving the inn. The rumors about Broken Sword Shahitsu had naturally spread, but most of the people sitting on the first floor were not there in the morning, so they did not know what Feng Bujue's group looked like. Furthermore, the lobby was noisy, and there were many people walking around. Therefore, when the 4 players walked down the stairs and left the inn in pairs, they did not attract much attention. Only a few people recognized them, but these people at most pulled the people around them aside and pointed at them. After Feng Bujue and Passing Rain left the inn, they walked down the road and headed north. It was almost noon, and the sun was high in the sky. The 2 walked briskly for a while, and they felt the heat. This kind of heat had an effect on the exhaustion of their stamina points, but it was not obvious. They walked for about 20 minutes and arrived at the northernmost border of the village. There were no more houses here, and the view was getting wider. They could see a few abandoned farmlands in the distance, and the original farmhouses had collapsed, leaving behind a pile of rotten wood and stone. They continued to head north, and the mountain that they could see before was now right in front of them. The rise and fall of the terrain became more obvious, and it was tilting upward. There was only one path left under their feet. The further they walked, the shallower the path became until it disappeared completely. At noon, the two had walked into the mountain. The ground under their feet was hard soil and grass, and the forest around them was getting thicker. Fong Bujue thought that entering the dense forest would make them feel hot and stuffy, but the reality was the temperature around them was getting lower and lower. This is strange. The slope of the mountain is quite steep. It doesn't look like a building. Fong Bujue noticed that something was wrong, so he opened his mouth to comment. "Let's try walking a bit more," Passing Rain quickly replied. "Okay." Fong Bujue nodded and continued to lead the way. Even though this situation was a bit strange, there was no reason to stop exploring. Whether it was stamina or time, the two had plenty of time. They could walk for another 2 or 3 hours. They walked for about 10 minutes before Fong Bujue suddenly stopped and turned around to ask, "I say, did you notice?" Passing Rain asked, "What?" "After entering the mountain along the way, I didn't see any animal tracks or excrement, not even a bird or insect." Fong Bujue said, "In fact, there wasn't even the chirping of birds or cicadas. This forest is unbelievably quiet." He paused and frowned. "And don't you think it's getting cooler?" Passing Rain heard that and thought for a few seconds before answering, "Supernatural setting. In any case, it's definitely not a phenomenon from a wuxia world," Fong Bujue replied. "It could be supernatural, fantasy, or even science fiction. In any case, this forest is obviously abnormal." He looked around and said, "There are no living creatures, and the closer we get to the center, the colder it gets, because this is the forest of no return." Suddenly, a shrill female voice rang out. This sudden statement caused Passing Rain to shiver involuntarily, and her terror points fluctuated. Fong Bujue did not think much of it. He quickly turned to the source of the voice and turned to look at a large tree on the left with Passing Rain. The trunk of the tree was very thick, and the speaker was completely hidden behind the tree, leaving no trace behind. However, when Fong Bujue and Passing Rain's eyes moved to the tree, half of a waxy face slowly moved out from behind the trunk. Chapter 208. Using the word scary to describe that face was the perfect word. The face looked like an old woman who had lived for more than 300 years, and the aging process had been accelerating. To put it this way, Fong Bujue did not have the heart to comment on the face because all the words that came to his mind were harsh. He could only sigh in a more tactful manner. It's like the scene of a tragic car accident. His eyes widened, and he shook his head. "I can't even move my eyes away." The owner of the face behind the tree was obviously a monster in terms of setting. This kind of existence was set up by the system to be hostile to the players from the beginning. They would selectively ignore the words of the players like the sci-fi, worldview, and car accident that came out of Fong Bujue's mouth. This monster would not comment on them, and these words would not trigger any flags or change the monster's behavior. "You are looking for the Temple of the Hidden Bell?" the strange face asked. "Yes," Fong Bujue replied immediately. Passing Rain glanced at Fong Bujue from the corner of her eyes. She could not help but admire him. She thought to herself, he has just heard the name Temple of the Hidden Bell 2 seconds ago, but he can answer her without hesitation, and there is no sign of lying on his face. Ha! The strange face laughed, and then the sound of a bell came from behind the tree. "You don't have a bell, so how are you going to find it?" The strange face raised her arm and poked it out from behind the tree. She was wearing a very normal white cloth shirt, and from the exposed sleeve, her clothes were very clean and neat. In Fong Bujue's imagination, the person before him would have her arm wrapped in a rotten mummy bandage, but he did not expect this. However, he did not dwell on the issue of clothing for too long because his attention was immediately attracted by the bell in the woman's hand. It was a small bell that could be held in the palm of one's hand. It was silver in color, and the sunlight that filtered through the gaps in the tree's shade shone on the bell, reflecting a rather blinding light. "With this bell of yours, can we find the Temple of the Hidden Bell?" Fong Bujue asked. "Yes, you have to carry the bell to find the temple door," the strange face replied. "Do you want it?" "What? Does that mean you can give it to me?" Fong Bujue asked again. "Sure, The The strange face laughed again. In a way, it was scarier than when it was not laughing. Come over here and take it, and I'll give it to you. Hee hee. Sure. Fong Bujue smiled as he took out his stool from his backpack. The strange face did not know what to think. Perhaps she did not realize that Fong Bujue had taken out a weapon. When Fong Bujue was about 3 meters away from her, she asked, "Wait a minute. What are you holding?" "Oh, this?" Fong Bujue replied calmly. "A stool. What are you doing with the stool?" "I've been standing for a long time. I want to sit down for a while," Fong Bujue replied. "Since I got the bell, I'm going to sit down and rest." The strange face looked suspicious. "All right, come here." Passing Rain stood where she was. Looking at the situation, she wanted to laugh. She believed that only Fong Bujue would be able to make such a joke in this kind of atmosphere. However, Passing Rain did not let her guard down. If the monster made any sudden move to attack, Passing Rain would react instantly to help. Fong Bujue soon reached the tree. With every step he took, he placed his weight on the leg behind him. The leg that he took out first tapped the ground with the tip of his toes. After making sure there was no trap on the ground, he took the next step. "What are you doing now?" the strange face asked. Fong Bujue replied, "Stretching my legs to see if there's anything wrong with them." "Don't you know if there's anything wrong with your own legs?" The strange face suddenly looked vicious. "Are you suspecting that I've set a trap for you?" "Of course not," Fong Bujue replied calmly. "Whether there's something wrong with my legs or not, you need to take 2 steps to know." At this point, he imitated MJ's moonwalk and moved back a few steps. "See, this is called taking 2 steps." Passing Rain finally could not help but burst out laughing. The monster was dumbfounded. What was going on? This person used the action of walking forward to move back. "All right, come over here. Do you still want the bell?" The strange face's eyes and tone revealed obvious eagerness and greed. Fong Bujue had basically ruled out the possibility of a trap through observation and careful observation of the surroundings. So he thought, the problem must be with the tree. "Can I ask, why are you hiding behind the tree?" Fong Bujue asked. "Come over and see for yourself." "Won't you know?" the strange face replied. Fong Bujue was already very close to her. He only needed to move a few meters to the side, and he would be able to see the situation behind the tree. However, just as he was about to move, the strange face saw through him and immediately shouted, "Don't move. Why are you going there?" "To see why you're hiding behind the tree." As Fong Bujue answered, he walked around the tree while maintaining his distance. He wanted to see what was behind the tree. To his surprise, the strange face followed his movement and walked around the tree, still only showing her head and one of her arms. "Don't come around." The strange face saw that the situation was not good and started to threaten him. "Stick close to the tree and walk over, or I'll destroy the bell." The monster neglected one thing. When she followed Fong Bujue's movement and changed her hiding angle, Passing Rain had already entered her blind spot. At that moment, Passing Rain moved silently and approached from the other side of the tree. From Fong Bujue's angle, naturally, he could see what Passing Rain was doing, but his expression and eyes did not give away his teammates' movement. There was no sign of nervousness or guilt on his face. "Okay, I'm coming over. I'm really coming." Fong Bujue raised his voice slightly and uttered some nonsense. "I will take big strides over here now." He dragged out his words, but his feet did not move at all. This was to buy time and cover for Passing Rain at the same time. In fact, Passing Rain didn't need this kind of laughable cover. In just 10 seconds, she quickly and quietly circled to the angle where the strange face was hiding. The scene that greeted her eyes shocked Passing Rain. She could not help but frown. She immediately shouted at Fong Bujue. She only has a head and one arm. Her neck and arm are both grown from the tree. "Don't get close to that tree." Chapter 209. "Huh, I knew it." Hearing that, Fong Bujue yelled at the strange face. "Demon, show yourself." His shout was full of vigor, but he didn't seem to want to get close to the monster. The monster was straightforward. Since it couldn't pretend anymore, it gave up on this lousy disguise. The strange yellow face quickly changed, the coarse and dense wrinkles on its face turned into the texture of tree bark. Not long after, the head and the arm that were hiding behind the tree became two branches on the tree trunk. At the top of the branch that the arm turned into, there was a small bell hanging. At the same time, on the tree trunk, facing passing rain, two long slits the color of dirty blood suddenly appeared. It was like a pair of eyes suddenly opened. The eyelids were the bark, and under the bark there was a pair of huge black pupils. "You really are a busybody." A deep voice came from inside the tree trunk. "Come if you have the ability." Passing rain didn't reply. She didn't have anything to say. She just used her actions to respond. Her holy seal sword flashed. She swung her arm diagonally. A sword aura mixed with spiritual energy suddenly shot out. It was unknown how powerful Passing Rain's attack was. It was actually able to tear a hole more than 2 meters long in the tree trunk. The tree obviously had no way of moving or dodging, and its trunk took the hit head-on. In the cut bark, dirty blood flowed out. "Ah!" A scream came from the tree trunk, as if the monster was experiencing great pain. Feng Bujue had already circled around to Passing Rain's side. He knew that as long as he kept a few meters away from the tree, there wouldn't be any threat, so he went around without worry. "Its defense seems to be weak," Feng Bujue muttered. "Its attack range seems to be very low." He turned to look at Passing Rain. "Then this guy's damage is probably very high. If you get close to it, you might be killed in one hit. That skill of mine doesn't have a long cooldown, but it does require a bit of mana." Passing Rain understood what Feng Bujue meant, but her ranged attacks were limited. So, leave it to me," Feng Bujue said with a smile. His expression was one of anticipation. Passing Rain sheathed her sword and said, "Please go ahead." "You." The big tree seemed to notice Feng Bujue's malicious look and immediately asked, "You? What do you want to do?" "Don't be afraid. I just want to ask you a few questions," Feng Bujue said as he put down the stool. Then he knelt on one knee and took out Miss Moxie's bad temper from his inventory. He placed it on the stool and aimed at the huge, immobile target a few meters away. Passing Rain watched from the sidelines. She had never seen a player say something like "don't be afraid" to a monster before, let alone imagine such a scene. "What if I don't want to answer?" The monster replied in a vicious tone. "Tat, tat, tat." The sound of gunfire answered its question. Feng Bujue pulled the trigger lightly, and a few bullets flew out from the muzzle of the submachine gun. His gun's element was fire, and the special effect was especially suitable for destroying flesh. Obviously, whether the tree was an animal or a plant, it was a monster that was severely countered by this weapon. "Ah! Ah! Ah!" The monster roared. Just a few bullets left small sparks on its body. If not for the blood that flowed out from the tree bark to extinguish the fire, the whole thing would have burned. If you don't want to be burned to ashes, then from now on, I'll ask you questions and you'll answer. Feng Bujue used his actions to make the monster unable to refuse. He asked, "First, tell me what kind of monster you are, and what's your name?" "I don't know," the monster replied. "Ah, you got guts." Feng Bujue prepared to fire again. "Wait, I'm telling the truth," the monster quickly explained. "Is that so? Fine. It doesn't matter what your name is anyway." Feng Bujue raised his head and temporarily gave up on aiming. "Then, tell me, what is the meaning of the forest of no return that you mentioned earlier?" The monster thought about it for a few seconds and asked, "Will you let me go if I tell you?" "Tat, tat, tat. Ah, fine. I'll tell you." "Stop." The monster begged for mercy from the beating. It was silent for a while, as if waiting for the pain to subside. Then it said, "Decades ago, the villagers at the small town at the foot of the mountain were very afraid of this forest, so they gave it the name Forest of No Return. No one dares to come to this forest, and even if they do, they can't get out." "Is it because there are many monsters like you in the forest?" Feng Bujue asked. "Yes, but not many." The big tree sneered. "I don't know if I'm a monster. I'm just an old tree in this forest. But because that child's resentment was too strong, the whole forest was immersed in it, and under its influence, I became like this." As it said this, the crack on the bark that was cut open by Passing Rain suddenly split open, and with a splash of dirty blood, the thing inside the trunk appeared before Fong Bujue and Passing Rain's eyes. It turned out that the trunk of the tree was stuffed with dead people, and the dead people's faces were extremely gruesome, with a frightened expression frozen on their faces. Every body had limbs missing, but they were rotten but not rotten, and all the dead bodies were twisted together like braids, with blood oozing out of their 7 orifices. These villagers of the Zhongling town all reaped what they sowed, and their descendants will also suffer retribution. As the monster spoke, it closed the crack again. You are also Taoist priests that the villagers hired to catch ghosts, right? Fong Bujue said, a tree demon in the mountain knows about the existence of Taoist priests in this world. Many years ago, there were many monks, wandering Taoist priests, and sorcerers who specialized in catching ghosts that came to this mountain. I can't count how many of them, but in the end, they all lost their lives at the hands of that child, the monster replied. It mentioned that Zhongling town? Passing Rain interjected. Fong Bujue was about to ask the same question. So he asked the monster, the town at the foot of the mountain is called Zhongling town, but why did you call it Zhongling town? This place has always been called Zhongling town. When did it change to Zhongling town? The monster replied. Fong Bujue looked at Passing Rain and lowered his voice to say, decades ago, something must have happened. The truth behind the abandonment of this village might have something to do with the person who left behind the 3 words at the entrance of the village. Passing Rain followed Fong Bujue's train of thought, but for now, she could not come to a conclusion. She only replied softly, ask about the spirit. Fong Bujue lifted his head and asked the monster, the child that you mentioned was killed by the villagers, right? What happened? You'll have to ask her yourself. I only know that her resentment was monstrous, and she hated those villagers to the bone. I presume she must have died unjustly. As for exactly how she died, I really don't know. The monster replied. Then where is she now? Fong Bujue asked again. The Temple of the Hidden Bell, the monster answered. Where is the Temple of the Hidden Bell? How do we get there? Fong Bujue asked. Take my bell and hold it before your eyes. As long as you face the direction of the temple, the bell will ring. Oh! Fong Bujue's eyes moved to the branch with the bell. Is it possible for you to throw the thing to me? The monster replied, I can't do that. I see. Fong Bujue suddenly stopped speaking. He put on a shocked expression and pointed to the other side of the tree. What is that? Even Passing Rain was shocked. Although she was standing right next to Fong Bujue, their vision was basically the same, and she did not see anything out of the ordinary, but Fong Bujue's shocked expression and tone were so realistic that she could not help but feel nervous. It was unknown what happened to the demonic tree, but its eyes suddenly moved along the bark and turned to the other side, just like a human turning their head. At that moment, Fong Bujue immediately activated body enhancement spell and rushed forward. With lightning speed, he successfully stole the bell, pulled it off the branch, and retreated to a safe distance. The demonic tree's last hope was shattered at that moment, because when the player got close to the bell, that was its only chance to attack, but that was no longer possible. Fong Bujue used a very childish trick that was similar to Watch Your Back to get the quest item. Item name, bell item type, plot item quality, normal function. Locate the location of the Temple of the Hidden Bell. Can be taken out of the scenario. No remark. This small bell appears to have a connection with a powerful evil spirit. Okay, it's done. Let's go. Fong Bujue told Passing Rain. After he succeeded, the first thing he did was deactivate body enhancement spell and put away the stool and gun. It was as if he felt that there was nothing valuable left on the demonic tree that he could squeeze out of it. Are we not going to kill it? Passing Rain asked. Let's save some bullets. As Fong Bujue answered, he raised the bell, extended his arm, and slowly turned it with his body as the axis. When he turned it to the northwest, the bell suddenly moved twice on its own, and it made a tinkling sound. Fong Bujue turned his head and shared a look with Passing Rain. The two did not say anything, ignoring the monster behind them. They moved in the direction that the bell had pointed at without turning back. Once the two of them were far away, The demonic tree muttered in a low voice, When the two of you are killed by that child, she will still bring the bell back and hang it on my body. After saying this, all the strange phenomena on the tree trunk disappeared, and it returned to the appearance of an ordinary tree. Chapter 2:10. On the other hand, when Feng Bujue's group was exploring the mountain, Xiao Tan and Laughing Soul's search was progressing smoothly. Actually, there was not much of a target, so they were quite relaxed. Even if they found nothing after a whole day, it could not be helped. That was how Thriller Paradise was. If they were lucky, perhaps they could find a piece of excellent equipment in an inconspicuous place, and the process of obtaining it was not that difficult. If they were not lucky, it was normal for them to find nothing after the whole scenario. Their search began from the east side of the town. They searched room by room. Although most of the abandoned houses were empty, they could not rule out the possibility that there were props hidden in the dusty bottles, wooden boxes, and on the beams under the floorboards, inside the walls, and even the tattered beds. In any case, for a game like this, one had to explore it with the spirit of playing Zelda without reading the guide. There is something I wish to ask you. When Xiao Tan asked Laughing Soul, he was lifting the lid of a large wooden pot on the stove. It was unclear what he expected to find inside the pot. 2 silver coins? Fine, I don't have a boyfriend. Laughing Soul was rummaging through a cupboard that was filled with spider webs. That's not what I wanted to ask you. Huh? Laughing Soul did not even turn her head when she answered, like she was not paying attention. Then what is it? Why would you use such a weird tone to ask me when we are alone? She seemed to be reminded of something and added, I'm warning you. I'm not a casual person. What are you thinking? Xiao Tan said. I want to ask, is Xiao Ling your real name? Yes, why? Gu as in ancient times? Yes. Laughing Soul replied. Xiao as in petty, Ling as in spirit. From the way she explained her name, one could see that she had a different personality. Xiao Tan frowned and looked like he was thinking. Laughing Soul was still talking. Laughing Soul's name is actually just an inverted name with a word before it. When you heard my cousin call me Little Bone, you should have guessed that my real name is pronounced Gu, right? If a girl's name has this word, it should be in her surname. It's nothing more than Gu. She was nagging, but she still said in an impatient tone, You're so stupid. Is your head just for decoration? Think more when you encounter problems. Xiao Tan didn't care about what she said. In fact, he was thinking about other things and didn't really listen. It's strange. There's an ancestral rule in my family that says, don't make friends with people with the surname Gu, Xiao Tan said. Laughing Soul was stunned when she heard that. Ha. She suddenly laughed. This is such a coincidence. My family has a rule as well. It says that for the descendants of the Gu family, as long as they have a friend with the surname Wang, there is no need to be courteous with them. I'm not kidding, Xiao Tan said seriously. I'm not kidding either. I'm serious. Laughing Soul replied with a mocking smile. But Wang is a common surname, Xiao Tan said. Laughing Soul reached out to knock lightly on Xiao Tan's head. That's why who would treat this kind of ancestral rule seriously? Idiot. She had no intention of attacking, so she was not stopped by the system. Xiao Tan shrugged. You're right. It's probably because one of my ancestors had a grudge against the Gu family, and they did something stupid. That's why they left this. Before he finished, he was hit again. What now? You mean my ancestors also did something stupid? Laughing Soul said with annoyance. Fine, just pretend I didn't say anything, Xiao Tan replied. In order not to be hit again, he climbed onto the stove after saying that, and leaped onto the beam of the roof. Now that he had mastered the basics of agility, this kind of height was nothing to him. By the way, since it's just the two of us, I have something to ask you, Laughing Soul said. I don't have a girlfriend, Xiao Tan replied. Plus, I'm a very casual person. Ha. Laughing Soul laughed drily as a response to this joke. Then she said, seriously, is the captain the kind of player who doesn't spend money when he plays games? We don't play games that charge money. In any case, in the few games that we've interacted with, I've never seen him use in-game items. Xiao Tan crawled on the roof that was covered in dust. He knocked on the roof inch by inch, trying to check whether there was a hollow layer underneath. But for games that require money, he would often buy a monthly or even a quarterly membership. It seems like he thinks it's too troublesome to recharge. Oh, in other words, it's not that he's stingy, but it depends on whether he wants to spend money on the game or not. Laughing Soul asked, "How should I put this? Brother Jew is a very complicated person. It's hard to tell what his principles are." Xiao Tan said, "It seems like whenever he realizes he's about to cross the line, he will set up a new boundary." "That sounds like he's trying to break the limit," Laughing Soul said. "Huh." Xiao Tan chuckled. Suddenly, with a cracking sound, the roof beam broke from the middle. This was probably caused by years of neglect, and the wood had rotted from the inside. Xiao Tan was kneeling on the roof. When the beam broke, his face was facing downward, so his reaction was relatively quick. He adjusted his posture in the air easily. Before he landed, he changed into a standing position and landed on his feet. Unexpectedly, when he came into contact with the floor of the house, he suddenly felt the soles of his feet soften, as if he had stepped on empty air. Then there was a series of creaking sounds. It was the sound of the floor collapsing. It turned out that the kitchen floor of this empty house was less than half a meter thick. Below that, it was completely suspended in the air. Due to the passage of time, the wood had rotted, so it was natural for it to be weaker. When Xiao Tan and Laughing Soul were walking on it normally, the floor could handle their weight, but now that Xiao Tan was falling from the roof and was standing on the floor, the two broken beams carried a considerable weight. The floor could not handle the weight, and it collapsed. Laughing Soul's first reaction was fast. She immediately reached out to grab Xiao Tan. In that split second, she grabbed the man's wrist tightly. However, she was a girl, and her weight was much lighter than Xiao Tan's. Furthermore, the collapse of the floor had affected the whole room. Laughing Soul's feet were not steady, so she had no place to grab onto. Therefore, she also fell down together with him. The two fell into a dark abyss, and in that moment, they were several hundred feet down. They had no idea whether it was a mountain of swords or boulders. But from the distance they were falling, even if they hit the ground, they would not survive. Chapter 211. The feeling of falling was enough to wake a person up from a nightmare. It would make the heart tighten, limbs freeze, and scream. Strangely enough, when the two of them landed, only Laughing Soul made a sound. Xiao Tan, the man who was easily flustered, was strangely calm at this moment of life and death. In the blink of an eye, he reached out and grabbed Laughing Soul's wrist. Then, using his own strength, he pulled Laughing Soul to the position above him. In a dangerous situation, his instinct was to pull his teammate up and use himself as a human cushion. This went to show that the man was a good person. Of course, if the two were falling into a bottomless abyss, this action would have been pointless. It would have been the difference between life and death. Thankfully, the feeling of falling only lasted for several seconds. With a splash, the two fell into the water. In the darkness, the feeling of falling stopped. Xiao Tan felt a chill run down his back, and then pain and suffocation overwhelmed him. However, at the time, he was overjoyed because he knew that if they fell into the water, they would not die yet. The impact of the fall was huge, and after they hit the surface, they kept sinking. Xiao Tan knew that they were not out of danger yet. He held his breath, and when the sinking slowed down, he started to kick. He did not let go of Laughing Soul's wrist. After they rose a little, he used his left hand to hug Laughing Soul and his right hand to push against the water. Not long after that, their heads poked out of the water. Once they were out of the water, they sucked in a deep breath. "I know how to swim." That was the first thing that came out of Laughing Soul's mouth after she took 2 breaths. "You should have said that earlier." "I'm so tired," Xiao Tan said as he let go of Laughing Soul. He kept a distance from her and started to paddle with his hands. "Say your head." She smacked Xiao Tan's forehead. "Do you think I have a chance to say that?" "Aya." Xiao Tan groaned from the pain. "Then, when I carried you and swam up, how come you didn't move at all? Since you're already talking about being a lifeguard, I can only play along with you." Laughing Soul replied, "What if I try my best to struggle, and you continue to be so stubborn? What if both of us drown?" "Oh," Xiao Tan continued. By the way, are you okay? Yes, Laughing Soul replied. I want to punch you. Xiao Tan thought Laughing Soul was blaming him for dragging her down. So he said helplessly, you can't blame me for this. How would I know the beams would break and the floor would collapse? Huh? Laughing Soul laughed drily in response. She didn't have anything to refute at the moment. After all, she was the one who pulled Xiao Tan's wrist, which was why they fell together. If her first reaction had been to jump back, perhaps she would still be up there. Then she could go find a rope or something to save Xiao Tan as well. It was better than the two of them being trapped in this place with no one to help them. At that moment, there was no light source around Xiao Tan and Laughing Soul. There was only a small bit of light above their heads, and it came from the hole that they had fallen through. Unfortunately, the hole was indoors and not out in the open, so the small bit of light was unable to illuminate this place. Even though they were conversing, there was only darkness before their eyes, and they could not see each other. However, since they were so close and there was the sound of water splashing, they knew each other's location even without seeing each other. Laughing Soul had used the darkness to knock on Xiao Tan's head. Oh no, my flashlight was in the previous scenario. Xiao Tan was about to say that his light source was broken when he suddenly felt Laughing Soul place something on his head. With a click, a bright light source appeared. A yellow miner's hat appeared on Xiao Tan's head. You still have this? Xiao Tan asked. He still remembered that in the scenario where he first met Laughing Soul had wanted to use this thing to trade for his flashlight. Yes, Laughing Soul replied. I remember I used this to trade for your flashlight, but you gave me one and told me something like, it's silly to wear it, so keep it for yourself. Laughing Soul replied, I remember I used this to trade for a flashlight, but you gave me one and said something like, it's silly to wear it, so keep it. Then, why did you keep this until now? This kind of equipment has lost its value a long time ago, Xiao Tan said. I hate being rejected the most, Laughing Soul said. She then knocked on Xiao Tan's head that was wearing the miner's hat. Look at you, wearing this kind of silly equipment. You look so compatible. I really miss the time when I first met you. Xiao Tan had a bitter expression. The Laughing Soul who called me Brother Xiao Tan and politely traded equipment with me is gone forever. Laughing Soul felt like her dark history had been exposed, so she changed the topic angrily. Stop wasting time. Quick, turn around and see if there's a place to stand. Do you want to stay in the water until you run out of energy? Xiao Tan shrunk his neck and really stopped talking. He turned slowly in the water to shine the light on his surroundings and above him. No matter what, the miner's hat was quite useful in this situation. At least it was a lighting device that could be operated without holding it up. With the movement of the light, the two of them could finally see the situation around them. The pool that they were in was not that big. There was a stone bank about 10 meters away. Above the pool was a vertical cylindrical tunnel, which was the path that they had fallen down. The entrance at the top of the tunnel was the hole in the empty house's kitchen, and the bottom of the tunnel looked like it was expanding. Overall, the space above the pool was like an inverted funnel. It was impossible to return the way they came. The pool was surrounded by stone walls, and only one side of it was a stone bank. Xiao Tan and Laughing Soul had no choice. The most important thing was to find a place to rest. The two swam over one after the other. When they reached the shore, they were both gasping for air from exhaustion. They collapsed to the ground to rest. The series of events had only happened in a few minutes, but they had used up quite a bit of their life points and stamina points. Falling into the water from such a height caused Xiao Tan to lose 67% of his life points, and Laughing Soul lost 59%. Of course, that was not much. In real life, if they jumped into the water from such a height, they might die instantly. The in-game characters had better physical fitness than normal people to survive. Staying afloat and swimming to the bank had used up more than 300 stamina points. For two level 17 players, that was almost 20% of their stamina points. I say, how we found some kind of ancient tomb? Xiao Tan turned to look behind him. There was a long path that led to an unknown place. What? Are you fantasizing about me, taking off my clothes to train with you? Laughing Soul replied. Actually, she was the one who was being shameless. I was going to say that we might be able to find equipment, skills, or hidden quests here, Xiao Tan said. But you suddenly said that. Before he could finish, he was hit on his head again. Even through the miner's hat, it still hurt. So, you also had the wrong idea? Laughing Soul huffed. You sure used the word also. Sigh. Fine. It's all my fault, okay? Xiao Tan had been bullied quite harshly. This underground pool was as cold as ice. Both of them were soaked, and the chill seeped into their bones. After sitting for a while, they could not help but shiver. Therefore, the two did not stay there for too long. They tried their best to wring the water out of their clothes and rest for a while. When the tiredness disappeared, they stood up and walked down the only path. Perhaps the rocks in this tunnel had the property of absorbing light. After walking for a short distance, the two of them realized that as long as they were a little further ahead, there was only a dark shadow. As long as the light went beyond 10 meters, it would almost completely disappear. Another thing worth noting was that this road was not uphill, but slanted downwards. When they fell into the pool, they were already very deep underground, and this path led to an even lower place. What was going on? Could this place lead directly to the Sun Luo Palace? After walking for another 10 minutes, the path stopped falling, and it was basically level. The tunnel became wider and wider. Without realizing it, the height and width of the tunnel had reached a size that could fit a subway train. Do you smell that? Laughing Soul suddenly asked. The tunnel was steamy, and the smell did not dissipate. About 1 minute ago, she had smelled a strange stench. That was not a good sign. Xiao Tan studied Laughing Soul for a few seconds with a curious gaze. Don't tell me you did that. I didn't even know this game could be played. Did your head? Laughing Soul's face was red. She yanked off his cap and scolded him harshly as she knocked on his head. Fine, looks like I misunderstood. Idiot. Scumbag. Hey, you won't be censored if you say that. Phew. Laughing Soul took a deep breath and tried to calm down. In the future, I will go to the auction house to see if there are any paper fans. My hands are hurting from all the slapping. I'm sorry, Xiao Tan said. My head is too hard. Is that what you need to apologize for? Laughing Soul slammed the cap back on his head. In any case, it's all my fault, okay? Xiao Tan said. You don't have to use violence, do you? Can't you use words to solve the problem? Brother Xiao Tan. Laughing Soul interrupted him with a smile. Her tone was kind, but her eyes were murderous. Can you please turn back and kill yourself? You'd better hit me. Roar. Suddenly, a roar that clearly came from a non-human creature interrupted their conversation. No one knew if the monster was annoyed by their conversation, or if it had discovered the presence of prey and wanted to hunt for food. Either way, the loud sound of some kind of giant creature crawling along the ground came from the tunnel in front of them, and it quickly approached the two players. Chapter 2:12. This underground cave was quite a large map. The tunnels intersected with each other, and there were many flags in the cave. There were 3 entrances in total, and they were hidden at 3 different corners of Chonglin Town. No matter which entrance they took, when they first entered, there was only one path to take. However, after passing through some monsters and traps, the number of paths would increase, and the various rewards would be distributed at the end or the middle of these paths. Theoretically speaking, the pool that Xiao Tan and Laughing Soul fell in could be reached by players who did not know how to swim. Even though the middle of the pool was deep, the water around it was shallow. Even if they held their breath and swam to the bottom of the pool, they could walk up because the distance was not that far. Furthermore, even if the players ran out of air and choked on water, they would not lose consciousness. However, their life points would continue to drop, and they would suffer from the feeling of drowning. If they continued to move down the path next to the pool, they would be ambushed by monsters. Sounds like something is coming. Hearing the strange noise coming from the front, Xiao Tan uttered another useless sentence. That was what I wanted to ask you earlier, Laughing Soul added. There are no plants on the wall, but there is a stench in the cave. This means that some kind of animal is roaming around. There was no smell when we first walked down the path, but here, the tunnel widens. This means that the animal is very large and can only move around here. As she spoke, she took out the MP5 from her inventory. She attached her flashlight to the gun and aimed it at the darkness ahead, ready to fire. Then we'd better run, Xiao Tan said. If we run back to a place where the tunnel is narrower, it won't be able to catch up to us. And then, Laughing Soul turned to ask, this is the only way. Even if the pool is temporarily safe, we won't be able to leave. You have a point. Xiao also took out his Winchester shotgun and loaded it. Actually, if they ran back, it was not a bad idea. After all, the players did not need to worry about food or sleep in the scenario. As long as they were not attacked by monsters, their survival was not threatened. When the sun set and their teammates realized that they had not returned to the inn, they would naturally come out to look for them. However, Feng Bujue had no idea what had happened to Xiao Tan and Laughing Soul. He would not have thought that the two were trapped inside a giant hole. He would have guessed that they had been captured by NPCs. Therefore, even if Feng Bujue and the others went from room to room to room to search for the two, they would only be able to roughly check if there was anyone in each empty room. They might not be able to find the hole in the ground in the remote empty room. In any case, there was a high chance that no one would discover them until the end of the scenario. That was Laughing Soul's prediction. It's coming. It's very close. Laughing Soul stared at the darkness and said in a low voice. Both her and Xiao Tan's detection specialization were E rank, but as a marksmanship specialization player, her vision was clearly superior to Xiao Tan's. When Xiao Tan heard this, he also aimed his gun and prepared to shoot. Roar! There was another roar mixed with a loud rumble. A monster the size of a car entered their line of sight. The monster was so large that it was hard to get a full view of it. However, its skin glistened under the light, showing the outline of its back. It looked like a giant crocodile. However, the monster's head was slightly different from a crocodile. It looked more like a dog, but the roar it made sounded like a bear's. With a bang, the shotgun in Xiao Tan's hand fired. At a short distance, this should have been a powerful shot, but at that moment, it failed to penetrate the monster's shell. At most, the shrapnel embedded itself into the crocodile's back, but it was unable to harm its flesh. Almost at the same time, Laughing Soul's MP5 started to fire, but her attack was more efficient and targeted. She aimed at the monster's eyes, and her shots were rhythmic. The giant crocodile knew that it would be bad if its eyes were shot, so it opened its jaws and kept shaking its head to evade the bullets as it continued to charge forward. Retreat. That one word from Laughing Soul was simple and clear. Xiao Tan understood what she meant. He knew that she was not talking about retreat, but retreat as we fight. Therefore, he fired as he reloaded. He retreated with Laughing Soul and continued to attack the enemy. The monster was attacked. Even though it did not suffer much damage, it was not completely unaffected. Furthermore, to protect its eyes from being attacked, it kept shaking its head, and its crawling speed was naturally affected. With the giant crocodile slowed down, Xiao Tan and Laughing Soul had more time to deal with it. After all, they had long-range weapons and plenty of ammo. As long as they maintained a distance of more than 5 meters, they would be able to kill the monster. The appearance of this monster was intimidating. It was quite scary to be able to charge at them in such a narrow and dark environment. If the players ran with their backs facing it, the sense of urgency of being chased would be very strong. However, in terms of setting, this monster was not that strong. In fact, it was easier to deal with compared to the tree demon that Feng Bujue and Passing Rain had encountered on the mountain. Its speed was average, and it would slow down with some suppression. Its defense was high, but its weakness was very obvious, and it could be easily seen through by the players. Its attack style was simple, and it was purely physical, so its attack power might not be able to kill the players in one hit. Most importantly, the surrounding environment had basically given the players a clear way to deal with it. Players who only knew how to fight in close combat could choose to turn and run. Once they reach a spot where the monster could not catch up, they would be safe. Players with long-range attacks, needless to say, could use their long-range weapons to slow down the monster and kite it. After all, the tunnel was so small, and the target was so big that it would be harder to miss than to hit it. In reality, if one knew about the flag beforehand, it would be easier to turn and run. This was because the monster would be stuck somewhere in the tunnel and lose its ability to move. Then, it would be much easier to kill it. This kind of guiding setting seemed to make the battle too easy, but in fact, from the system's point of view, this was reasonable. For a hidden tunnel like this that was obviously hiding some kind of reward or plot flag, the system would not give the players a path that would lead them to certain death. If that was the case, it would have been better to set it so that they would fall to their death. Therefore, when the players had depleted 2/3 of their life points and a certain amount of stamina points, the battle that followed would not be too difficult, unless it was a nightmare difficulty. Roar. Sure enough, after another roar, the two people who had been kiting the monster for 5 minutes discovered rather gloomily that, as the monster chased after them, it got stuck in a place where the rocks converged and couldn't move anymore. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.